My name is Emily. I'm 34 and married to Michael, the love of my life. We live in a cozy house I got from my parents, in a quiet suburb. Michael and I have been trying to have a baby, but it hasn't been easy. I've had miscarriages, and each one hurts a lot. Michael is a kind man who always helps his family. His mom, Mrs. Thompson, and his sister, Laura, who is divorced and has 2 kids, often rely on him. They live together, and Laura struggles to make ends meet. One morning, while I was setting the breakfast table, Mrs. Thompson came in. She pretended to care and said I was brave for handling everything, glancing at my empty womb. I forced a smile and replied, "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. We're hopeful." Laura then walked in, acting like she owned the place, and praised Michael for supporting them. Michael quickly changed the subject to breakfast and shared news about the house. He said he put all his savings into it for our future, so he might need to cut back on expenses. Mrs. Thompson looked upset, and Laura dropped her fork, saying they depended on him. Michael replied gently but firmly that we needed to plan for our future too. After breakfast, as Michael left for work, Mrs. Thompson pulled me aside. She whispered that if I couldn't give Michael a child, he might rethink our relationship. I felt a lump in my throat but said, "Michael and I are in this together. We'll figure it out." As they drove away, I stood at the door, knowing things were about to get tough. My home, which felt like a sanctuary, was turning into a battleground. Life at home became a balancing act. Michael left early and came back late, tired and unaware of the tension. The days were long, filled with silent struggles. On Wednesdays, Laura usually dropped off her kids, treating our home like free daycare. I was making coffee when Laura came in with her kids. She told me to help them with homework while she ran errands, barely looking at me. I tried to keep my voice calm, but I wanted to say I had things to do too. She waved me off, saying I could manage. After she left, I sat with her kids, Ella and Max, trying to help with their homework, but my mind kept going back to how Laura saw me as just a helper. Later, Mrs. Thompson came over without knocking, acting like she owned the place. She sat down and said she was worried I wasn't taking good care of Michael. "A man needs his wife to support him," she added, looking me over. "I do my best, Mrs. Thompson." "Michael knows that," I replied, feeling my cheeks get warm. She sighed dramatically, showing her disappointment. "Well, I suppose you do what you can, but remember, a happy husband makes a happy home. Right now, this house doesn't feel very happy." Her words hurt, but I stayed calm. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, even though I wanted to tell her how unfair she was being. When evening came and Michael got home, the mood shifted. Mrs. Thompson became the loving mother, and Laura acted like a caring sister. They laughed and chatted with Michael, making the house seem cheerful, but I knew it was all a show. Behind closed doors, their true colors showed selfishness and indifference. I felt stuck in the middle, hoping things would improve someday. The situation at home started to wear me down. Laura's demands and Mrs. Thompson's subtle digs became part of my daily life. Talking to Michael about his family felt pointless, he just didn't see what I faced every day. One evening, after a particularly tough day, I decided to talk to Michael again. We were in the living room, the TV on but neither of us really watching. "Michael, we need to talk about your mother and Laura," I said, turning off the TV. He looked surprised. "What about them? They're here all the time and it's really getting to me. Laura drops off her kids without asking, and your mother makes me feel small." Michael sighed and ran his hand through his hair. "Emily, they're family. They're going through a tough time. We need to be there for them. But what about us? What about our life together?" I asked, feeling frustrated and sad. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I know it's hard, but they need me. Can't you try a little harder for me? Try harder? I'm at my breaking point. I need you to see that." There was a heavy silence between us. Finally, Michael stood up. "I need some air," he said, and left the house. I sat alone, feeling more isolated than ever. The man I loved, who I thought would be my partner, seemed lost in his duty to a family that didn't respect me or our marriage. The next day, things got worse. Laura came over unannounced, as usual, but this time she brought boxes of her things. "What's all this?" I asked, confused, as she started to fill the living room. "I'm moving in for a while. Mom's house is too cramped with the kids," she said, acting like it was normal. "Moving in here?" I couldn't hide my shock. "Just for a bit." "You don't mind, do you?" "After all, we're family," she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I stood there, watching my home, my sanctuary, slowly being taken over. It felt like an invasion. I felt a deep sense of loss, not just for the peace of my home, but for the understanding and support I desperately needed from Michael. That night, lying in bed, I realized something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly feeling pushed to the edge in my own home. I had reached my breaking point, and it was time to make some tough decisions for my sanity and my marriage. Laura moving into our house felt like an invasion. Every morning was chaotic, with her kids running around and her taking over the kitchen. Mrs. Thompson visited more often, adding to the tension. One morning, I found Laura lounging on the couch, flipping through a magazine while her kids made a mess in the living room. I had just taken my first sip of coffee. "Laura, could you please watch Ella and Max? They're making quite a mess," I said, trying to keep my tone light. She glanced up, unfazed. "Oh, they're just kids, Emily. Let them be. You're too uptight." I felt a surge of frustration. "It's not about being uptight. This is still my house, and I'd like to keep it somewhat orderly." Laura rolled her eyes and went back to her magazine. "Fine, I'll handle it, but you could be a little more accommodating, you know." Her words stung, and I left the room feeling angry and helpless. Later that day, Mrs. Thompson arrived without knocking, as usual, and immediately started criticizing me. "Emily, dear, this place is a mess." "What have you been doing all day?" she asked, looking around with disdain. "I've been trying to work from home, Mrs. Thompson." "It's not easy with the kids around," I replied, my patience wearing thin. She sighed and shook her head. "A good wife would manage better. You should take lessons from Laura. She knows how to handle a household." I bit my lip, holding back the retort I wanted to say. Arguing with her felt pointless. That evening, when Michael came home, the house buzzed with his mother's and sister's laughter. They transformed into a picture-perfect family in his presence. I watched from the kitchen, feeling like an outsider in my own home. When Michael came in for a drink, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Michael, this can't go on. Your sister and your mother are taking over our home." "I feel like I'm living in a stranger's house," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. He looked surprised and then concerned. "Emily, I had no idea it was this bad." "I'm sorry. I'll talk to them." His words offered a glimmer of hope, but deep down, I wondered if anything would really change. The invasion of my space had taken its toll, and I wasn't sure how much more I could take. The house that once felt like a haven now felt like a battleground, and I was losing ground every day. Then, the day unraveled into a nightmare. Laura and Mrs. Thompson burst in, their faces twisted with a glee that sent chills down my spine. "Emily, pack your things. You need to leave now," Laura announced, barely able to contain her excitement. Stunned, I stammered, "What? Why should I leave my own house?" Mrs. Thompson smiled in a way that made my blood run cold. "Oh dear, didn't you hear? A policeman just called. Michael was hit by a car near his work. He's dead. And now, everything here is ours." My world stopped. "Dead? Michael can't be." I couldn't finish the sentence, my words dissolving into a sob. "That's right, and since you have no children, this house reverts to his family, us. So you need to leave," Laura added, her eyes scanning the room as if calculating its worth. I felt numb, my heart aching in a way I couldn't describe. "But this house is mine. I inherited it," Mrs. Thompson snorted. "That doesn't matter now. Michael's gone, and we're his family. We'll be taking over." They started walking around the house, looking at everything and discussing how much they could sell it for. Their callousness in the face of my tragedy felt surreal, like a twisted play. "But the police called you?" I whispered, clinging to the hope that this was all a mistake. "Yes, dear. They identified him by his broken cell phone," Mrs. Thompson said casually, examining a vase as if deciding its fate. I sank into a chair, my mind racing to grasp the reality of Michael's death and the vultures circling around me. The home we had shared, filled with love and dreams, had turned into a cold battleground. As they continued their morbid appraisal, something inside me broke. I was supposed to be mourning my husband, not defending my home against these scavengers. But a small, defiant part of me began to rise. Michael wouldn't have wanted this. He wouldn't want me cast out by his own family, especially not from a home that was rightfully mine. I knew I had to fight for him, for myself, and for the life we had built together. As Laura and Mrs. Thompson continued their grim assessment, a sudden noise at the door made us all freeze. The door opened, and to my disbelief, Michael walked in, alive and unharmed. "Michael!" I cried, rushing to him. "What's going on here?" he asked, his eyes moving from my tear-streaked face to the shocked faces of his mother and sister. "Michael, they told me you were dead." I sobbed, clinging to him. Mrs. Thompson recovered first. "The police called. They said someone was hit by a car, and they found your broken phone." Michael's expression hardened. "My phone was stolen near my office this morning. I reported it but didn't expect this." Laura stammered, we just assumed." "You assumed I was dead and decided to throw my wife out of her own house?" Michael's voice was cold, a tone I had never heard from him before. Mrs. Thompson tried to interject, but Michael cut her off. "Stop playing the victim. I heard everything. I can't believe you would stoop this low." I stood there, still in shock, but a wave of relief washed over me. Michael was alive, and he saw his family for who they truly were. He turned to me, his eyes softening. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what they were really like." Realizing their plan had crumbled, Laura and Mrs. Thompson scrambled for excuses, but Michael wasn't having any of it. "You need to leave now," he said firmly. "But Michael, this is our family home," Laura protested weakly. "It's Emily's home," Michael corrected her, "and you have no right to be here after what you've done." As they gathered their things, I looked at Michael. He seemed stronger and more resolute. The unveiling of his family's true nature had changed something in him and in us. After they left, the house fell silent, but it was a comforting silence. Michael and I sat together, a million words unspoken between us. We had a lot to talk about and heal from, but in that moment, I felt a sense of hope. I knew we would face this together. The reveal had been painful, but it marked a new beginning for us, built on truth and a stronger bond. After the revelation, Michael and I sat in heavy silence. He was the first to break it, his voice low but filled with determination. "I can't believe my own mother and sister would do something like this," he said, shaking his head. I took his hand, finding strength in our shared disbelief. "I know it's hard to understand, but at least we know their true intentions now." Michael nodded. "They only cared about the money and the house, not about us, especially not about you." I sighed, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. "I tried to tell you, but I never imagined it would come to this. We need to set things straight. I need to make sure they never do this to us again," he said, his jaw set. The next day, Laura and Mrs. Thompson returned, but their demeanor had changed. They were no longer confident and greedy, they seemed almost sheepish. "Michael, we didn't mean for things to go this far," Laura started, avoiding eye contact. "Yeah, it was just a misunderstanding," Mrs. Thompson added, her voice lacking its usual authority. Michael looked at them, his expression unreadable. "A misunderstanding? You celebrated what you thought was my death, and tried to kick my wife out of her own house. There's no misunderstanding there." I stood by Michael, feeling proud of his resolve. Laura fidgeted, looking anywhere but at us. "We just thought we were losing everything. We panicked." "And that justifies your actions?" Michael's tone was incredulous. Mrs. Thompson tried to reach out to him. "Michael, you're our family, we just got scared." Michael stepped back, Family doesn't do what you did. I can't just overlook this. The air was thick with tension, and for a moment, nobody spoke. Then Michael continued, I want you both to leave. We need space and time to heal from this. Laura and Mrs. Thompson exchanged glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. Without another word, they left, their heads bowed. Once they were gone, Michael turned to me. I'm sorry, Emily, for everything. I should have listened to you. I hugged him, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It's okay, Michael, we'll get through this together. That evening, as we sat in our living room, the house felt like ours again. The intentions of Laura and Mrs. Thompson had been exposed, and in facing that ugly truth, Michael and I had found a new sense of unity. We were ready to move forward, leaving the pain and deceit behind us. A few days later, life seemed to return to some normalcy, until Mrs. Thompson and Laura showed up again, acting as if nothing had happened. They barged into the living room where Michael and I were sipping our morning coffee. Michael, we've been thinking, we still need your financial support, for the kids and the house, Mrs. Thompson stated, her tone demanding. Yes, Laura chimed in. Michael, you can't just abandon your nephews. They need your help. I looked at Michael, sensing his growing frustration. He set down his cup calmly, though anger simmered beneath. Mom, after everything that's happened, you still expect me to support you financially? His voice was steady but firm. Yes, it's your duty as a son and a brother, Mrs. Thompson insisted, her eyes hard. Michael stood up, his resolve clear. No, Mom, I've made my decision. I'm not going to continue supporting you like before. I have my own family to think about. Laura's face flushed with anger. But you have nephews, Michael, they need money. Michael looked at her and then at me. I will support my nephews, but in a much more limited way. Emily and I have plans. We're going to adopt a child. I gasped, joy washing over me. Adoption. The idea filled me with unexpected happiness. Mrs. Thompson and Laura exchanged furious looks. You're choosing strangers over your own blood, Laura spat. It's not about that, Laura, it's about building the family I choose, Michael replied, his gaze unwavering. With no more words, Mrs. Thompson and Laura stormed out, leaving tension in the air. Once they were gone, Michael turned to me, his expression softening. Emily, adopting a child is just the beginning. I believe we will have our own children one day too. His hopeful words brought tears to my eyes. Michael, that's the most wonderful thing I could hear. A family, our family, however it comes to us. We embraced, a sense of peace enveloping us. The challenges with his family had only strengthened our bond. Looking to the future, we saw a world of possibilities, a world where our love could extend to a child in need and maybe, one day, to children of our own. The chapter of struggles and pain was closing, and a new chapter full of hope and love was beginning. Together, we were ready to write it, one day at a time.
I immediately put a temporary closed sign on the store and headed to the apartment where my son and his wife live. The room was pitch dark and I couldn't see well. It felt cool inside and it seemed like the heating was off. I called out the names of my 2 grandchildren as I entered the room. Candy, Freddie. Grandma's here. As I moved further in, 2 small figures moved in the unlit living room. When I turned on the light, there was Candy, looking thin and cold. Beside her, her brother Freddie was shivering as he ate a banana from Candy's hand. 4 frightened eyes stared at me. Candy, Freddie! I couldn't help it and hugged them both. Candy and Freddie clung to me tightly and started crying loudly. Their little hands gripped my body tightly. How scared and alone they must have felt. They must have been terrified and heartbroken, wondering why Mom hadn't come back from the hospital. Thinking about their feelings made my heart ache. Their dad wasn't here. When I called him to find out where he was, he laughed it off and said, "We're on a family trip. We'll be back tomorrow." "Is that so? Make sure you're safe." I said so before hanging up. He was in for a shock when he returned home. I'm Brianna. I run a small restaurant, and today, like every other day, lunchtime was hectic. This place, tomorrow, was inherited from my parents-in-law. Welcome. I'll get a table ready for you in just a moment. It's hard to keep up alone. Gerard, a regular, told me not to worry as I scrambled around. Take your time, no need to rush. His words provided a small comfort. Some customers have been coming since my parents-in-law's time, while others are new, coming because they live or work nearby. I love this busy time when customers enjoy our food. When someone says the food is delicious, I do a little victory pose in my heart. I used to run this place with my husband. People always feel down when they're hungry. That's why we cook to cheer them up. That was his motto. We used to enjoy brainstorming the menu, counting the till, and rearranging the seating. When our son Ethan was born, we continued like this until he reached high school. But when Ethan was in his second year of high school, my husband passed away in an accident. It was a tough time, and I even thought about closing down. Ethan was preparing for university exams and couldn't help with the shop. I didn't think I could manage on my own. Then, one of our regulars said, "We'll wait for you," on the street with a warm smile. Seeing that smile, I decided to try running it by myself once again. It'll be all right, we can make it work. I downsized to a manageable size on my own, consulting friends and my still living parents-in-law. 3 months after my husband's death, tomorrow had its restart. Ethan passed his university entrance exams and was accepted into his first choice school. I want to live on my own since it's far from home. Sure, that's fine. Let's go house hunting soon. I tried to accommodate Ethan's requests as much as possible. Because both my husband and I were always busy with the shop, we hardly had time for Ethan. The shop was flourishing, and we couldn't neglect it. After closing, my husband would stay for preparations. And I would come home to cook dinner and wait for him, entertaining Ethan. "Dad, are you working again today?" I remember Ethan asking that every night when he was little. With a look of loneliness. I wish we could have had more family dinners, but those were rare. I feel guilty for making Ethan feel lonely all this time. I want you to learn what you want, find what you love, and pursue it with all your heart. That's what I told Ethan on the eve of his university entrance exams and his moving out. Ethan just nodded silently, looking down. He said no more. Even after he started living on his own, I kept running the small shop by myself. We had enough savings for his university tuition, so we didn't need to use any scholarships. The 4 years he spent as a college student flew by in the blink of an eye. During that time, I continued to run the shop alone. After graduating, Ethan found a job and started working. Imagining Ethan leaving for work in a suit and tie made me smile quietly to myself, thinking about how much that little boy had grown. He even had a girlfriend he was serious about, planning to marry. I was so surprised when I met her that I almost couldn't believe my eyes. Ethan's girlfriend, Drew, was as beautiful as a magazine model. "Nice to meet you, I'm Drew. I'm dating Ethan." Her voice was so lovely and her manner of speaking so polite that I was overwhelmed. I thought she must be from a very wealthy family. "Not at all, we're just a normal family." She laughed, gracefully. I wondered what kind of charm Ethan had to attract such a wonderful person. They were already living together, or rather, Ethan had moved into Drew's place. I had no choice, my room was too noisy next to me. No choice, Ethan. It's fine. I was renting a slightly larger room anyway, so it worked out well. Drew said this cheerfully, as if to offer a lifeline. Her polite speech, graceful gestures, and bright smile. I liked her immediately and couldn't help but say, "Ethan may be like this, but please, take good care of him." Thus, they happily married, and 3 years later, they had 2 children. The firstborn was a girl named Candy. The second was a boy named Freddie. I've become a grandma, haven't I? I mused, speaking to my husband's photo. Even after the children were born, Drew made time to visit the shop. Hello, Brianna. Oh, welcome. Drew, what about your work? After the children were born, I switched to a job I could do from home. Oh, what a time we live in. I marveled, alternating my gaze between young Candy and Freddie. These little ones would also grow up and become independent like Ethan. Thinking about it made children seem all the more mystical, and I found myself staring at them longer. As the seasons came full circle, my 2 grandchildren grew. My face gathered more wrinkles, and before long, Candy was in elementary school. Candy, how old are you now? I asked her one day when she came to visit the shop. I'm 6 now, and I'll be 7 on my next birthday. Her response was so mature, it didn't seem like she was in elementary school. She must take after her mom. According to Drew, she takes good care of her younger brother, which is a big help. They don't fight and get along very well, she said, proudly talking about them. Everything seemed to be going well, and it felt like all was leading to a bright future, but that wasn't entirely the case. There was one thing that worried me. It was about Ethan. He couldn't seem to keep a job for long after getting employed. He left the company he joined right after graduating within half a year. There's too much to do. It's not worth the salary. Then he got another job. But he left that one too, within 3 months. I can't do what I want, and it's impossible to work without remote options these days. Changing jobs so frequently won't get you anywhere. It's not my fault. It's the bad economy. He would always find some excuse to quit his job. Watching him do this made me sigh in resignation. If you're not working, you should at least take care of Candy and Freddie. Me? No way. That's Drew's job, not mine. Drew was the one supporting the family instead of Ethan. Even while talking to me, Ethan was glued to his smartphone. I wondered what he was so engrossed in. Hey, Mom, take a look. I enjoy food blogging as a hobby and post it on social media. He showed me his phone, filled with photos of various dishes from different places. The photos of delicious-looking food. Ethan talked about his follower count and likes, but I didn't quite understand. Why don't you stop playing around with that and get a proper job? It's not just for fun. I'm serious about becoming an influencer. What's that? Just follow me on Mom and hit like. I don't understand all that. Give me your smartphone. I'll install this app and then you do this. With quick finger movements, he went through account setup and registration in no time. He also showed me which button was for liking and how to navigate the app. But after he left, I still didn't quite get it. I can't keep up with all this. I put the smartphone aside and focused on the shop's ledger instead. When I occasionally video call with Drew, she mentioned she was also told to check Ethan's social media. Despite having more important things to look after right here, I'm happier video calling with Candy and Freddie than browsing social media. Ethan had helped out at my shop for a bit right after he lost his job. He said it seemed easier than working at a company. Though no job is truly easy, having him help was appreciated. I heard it's becoming less common for children to take over their parents' businesses. I wasn't planning on forcing the shop on him. I was prepared to close it when the time came. However, I harbored a faint hope that maybe Ethan had changed his mind. Excitedly, I had Ethan help in the shop, greeting customers and taking orders. He got along well with the regulars, a refreshing sight. The first week seemed to start off well. Perhaps he's more suited to this than office work. That was what I thought, but from the next week Ethan began to slack off. He hardly took any orders, didn't clean up much or assist customers. Worse, he started browsing social media in front of customers. He even asked customers, both regulars and new ones, to follow him and like his posts. The next day, Ethan didn't show up at the time he was supposed to work. "Ethan, where are you? Are you off today?" I quit that job. It was harder than I thought. After that, he wouldn't answer my calls, and I was back to running the shop alone. Ethan stopped coming to the shop altogether after less than 10 days. Since then, Ethan focused more on social media than anything else. Meanwhile, Drew recently started working multiple jobs and cutting back on sleep. I worry she might collapse from overwork. But Ethan shows no concern and continues his food blogging and social media posts. During a rare video call, Drew let slip her true feelings. "I wish he'd at least earn some money." She looked unusually downcast, her usual bright smile gone. And her beautiful voice sounded dull. Ethan continues to be out and about, not at home. When I criticize his actions, he always says, "Being famous and expanding my network will lead to a future." Despite doubting the reliability of his plan, I listened. But if Ethan could make a living out of it, I also wanted to support him. Somewhere deep down, I too indulged in the hope of letting Ethan do what he wanted. Drew, too, believed in Ethan and couldn't bring herself to criticize him harshly. His actions, whether due to them or not, did result in a slight increase in followers and likes. However, I soon realized it was a mistake. One day, as usual, I was at the shop. It was as cold as midwinter outside, cloudy, and the forecast mentioned possible snow in the evening. Since customers rarely come after lunch, I spent the time on evening prep and cleaning. While wiping the tables, my smartphone rang in my pocket. It was Drew. Expecting another regular video call, I answered. But what came through was a very weak voice. "Brianna, I'm sorry. There's something I need to tell you." She had collapsed from overwork a few days ago and would be hospitalized for a while. "Hospitalized? How are you now? Are you okay?" "I'm managing." "You should have told me sooner without hesitating." "So sorry. I wanted to tell you, but Ethan said there was no need." "Ethan did?" "He said he would take care of the kids. But I'm worried about them." "Of course you are. What about Ethan? Is he at home?" It seemed unlikely that he would do such a thing. But with his wife hospitalized, even Ethan would presumably take care of the children. "He said he would look after the kids." I want to believe him, but... Hearing the hesitation in her voice gave me an uneasy feeling. "He's been posting photos on social media. I'm afraid he might not be looking after the children." Drew also followed Ethan's social media. And, suspecting as much, she checked the app. It turned out that on the day Drew was hospitalized, and the day after, he was carelessly posting pictures of his meals. I listened to Drew's story, dumbfounded. And those restaurants, they're quite far away. Something had to be done. I couldn't imagine children under 10 being able to fend for themselves, especially not with both parents absent. "Understood. I'll head over to your place right now." "Oh, could I come with?" "No, Drew. You need to rest properly." I ended the call a bit sternly to ensure she wouldn't insist on coming. She needed to stay put under doctor's orders. I immediately put a temporary closed sign on my shop and headed to my son and his wife's apartment. It wasn't too far away, luckily. Having a spare key for emergencies like this was a relief. I hurriedly unlocked the door and entered. "Candy! Freddie! Where are you?" The room was pitch dark and hard to see. Stepping inside, something like a plastic bottle brushed against my foot. The silence was eerie as I took another step into the cool, unheated room.
Candy, Freddy! Grandma's here!
Moving further in, I noticed two small shadows in the unlit living room. Turning on the light, I found a shivering Candy, looking thin. Next to her, Freddy was trembling, eating a banana from Candy's hand. Four frightened eyes stared back at me.
Candy, Freddy!
I couldn't help but hug them.
Grandma!
Candy and Freddy clung to me, crying loudly. Their small hands gripped me tightly. How scared and alone they must have felt. They were terrified and heartbroken, wondering why Mom hadn't returned from the hospital. Thinking about their feelings, my heart ached.
I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner. Everything's okay now.
I turned on the heating and, until the room warmed up, dressed them in extra jackets. I boiled water in the kitchen and made hot chocolate. Candy and Freddy happily drank their hot chocolate, seeming to relish it. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. In fact, I hadn't even seen anything that looked like his shoes. Hoping it was a misunderstanding, I called Ethan. He answered immediately.
Mom?
What's up? He replied nonchalantly. What are you doing?
I'm trying out this limited time menu right now. It's definitely worth a look.
Where are you now?
On a family hot spring trip. I'm coming back tomorrow.
In the background, I could hear the bustling noise of a tourist spot. Clearly, he was there alone, not with his family. He seemed utterly unconcerned about Drew or Candy and Freddy. I realized I had to protect them. Trying to stay calm, I said, "Is that so? Stay safe."
Huh?
Oh, yeah, about souvenirs. Before Ethan could finish, I hung up. He had kept Drew's hospitalization a secret. And just for some limited time food, he left his children alone. According to Candy, Ethan lied about going to work. I knew it. Mom worked too much and collapsed, right? Even at a young age, she understood why her mom had collapsed. Knowing the word overwork, she understood that her mom had been working too much. Why can't Ethan understand what even a child can? Mom looked really sick. So, I fed Freddy what was in the fridge.
And you, Candy? Did you eat anything?
No, I waited. She shook her head. Her cheeks were hollow, and for an elementary schooler, she was too thin. They hadn't eaten anything during the days without their parents. We haven't been to school. I want to see everyone. But I thought we had to wait for Dad. Tears welled up in Candy's eyes again.
You are one tough little girl, Candy.
I decided to stay at the apartment that day. I wanted to cook something for the kids, but the fridge was empty. Certainly, you can't make omelette rice with just ketchup.
It can't be helped. Let's eat out. What do you two want to eat?
Their hunger unleashed a torrent of requests, unable to settle on just one. Eventually, we went to a restaurant where they enjoyed pasta, mac and cheese, and cake. Seeing their full smiles reassured me. People always lose their spirits when hungry. I remembered my husband's words. Returning home full, the two quickly fell asleep. Watching their peaceful faces, I thought about Ethan. The next day came, and Ethan still hadn't returned. I checked his social media while talking with Candy. It's amazing how much information can be shared, but it also meant Ethan's actions were transparent. Today, he was at another restaurant, this time eating pizza. Ethan, just you wait. I took the kids to visit Drew in the hospital. It seemed we arrived just as she was being discharged. At the entrance, Drew and the kids joyfully reunited. But why are you here?
What Ethan is doing is inexcusable. You all need to come home.
But we can't impose on you.
The one imposing is Ethan. I'm so sorry for what he's done.
I whispered a plan to Drew. She was surprised at first, but then resolved to act. Eventually, Ethan returned home a week later than he said, only to find an empty house.
What? What's this?
Even this became a post on his social media, treating it as a joke. Minutes after posting, he showed up at my restaurant.
Hey, listen, Mom. Drew and the kids.
He started off incredulously, as if he couldn't believe it.
Nobody's home, and everything's gone.
And? It was lunchtime, and the restaurant was full of regulars. Eager for sympathy, Ethan began to loudly share his story.
I was doing it all for my family. Working hard on social media, and my wife and kids run away.
Oh, that's tough. While I listened disinterestedly, the regulars reacted differently. Chairs scraped as they slowly converged on Ethan.
Terrible, right? Right, everyone?
Ethan, clueless of the sentiment against him, tried to rally support.
You're Eth on social media, right? Yeah. A fan? Thanks for following. Don't joke. You practically forced us to follow you. Huh?
The others nodded in agreement.
Getting notifications was annoying. Then we see you disrespecting food. Did I do that? Playing with free toppings, saying dishes are bad after one bite. But that was just a joke. And you neglect your own wife and kids to play around. Like I said, I was becoming an influencer to earn money. What influencer?
Gerard, a regular, was red with anger as he scolded Ethan. Other regulars joined in, criticizing him, and the restaurant erupted in disapproval. Actually, I had filled in the regulars about Ethan's behavior just before he arrived. After being discharged, Drew immediately terminated the apartment lease. Now, she and the kids are living with me. As Ethan failed to support his family, preferring to dine out alone. Focused only on increasing his followers and likes on social media, he neglected his responsibilities. Upon hearing everything, the regulars, already familiar with Ethan's conduct online, were furious. One said,
I'll give him a piece of my mind.
Gathering others for support.
I'll give him a piece of my mind.
Gathering others for support. Unaware, Ethan continued posting on social media.
Stop it! I'm not the bad guy. Help!
Half crying, Ethan was physically pushed out of the restaurant by the regulars.
Don't ever show your face here again.
Ethan was sternly reprimanded by the regulars and ran away screaming. After that, he was nowhere to be seen. Weeks passed. The weather forecast started to mention the arrival of spring and the need for pollen allergy measures. Lately, my nose has been a bit itchy, perhaps due to the pollen. Drew suffers from hay fever, constantly complaining about her runny nose. I've noticed more of the regulars wearing masks too. I wonder about Ethan, but as far as I know, he didn't have hay fever. His whereabouts remain unknown. He was so focused on becoming famous, urging even his friends to follow him. But this desire backfired spectacularly. Since that day, informed followers quickly made his social media blow up. Naturally, his identity was recognized by those around him, and returning to this town is unlikely now. His disregard for food got him the comeuppance he deserved. I continue running the diner, living with Drew and the kids. Recently, we launched a website for tomorrow where customers can make reservations via smartphone. Drew, who works in web design, easily handled the task. The website features our dishes and the spirit of the diner inherited from my parents-in-law. And even mentions my husband. I never met my father-in-law, but through these stories, it feels like I have.
What a lovely website. Thank you, Drew.
Her contributions don't stop there. She has systematized the inventory and sales accounting, making daily bookkeeping much easier. What used to be done by hand now calculates automatically when entered into the computer.
How convenient.
Even I, who was not accustomed to smartphones, found it easy to adapt. Thanks to also accommodating phone reservations, we've seen an increase in customers. Candy, returning from elementary school, started to drop by the diner. She handles phone calls with care.
Yes, this is tomorrow. Yes, would you like to make a reservation?
Though slightly hesitant, she shakes her head affirmatively when asked if she needs help.
Our recommendation? It's the fried chicken. It's freshly made and crispy.
Watching her consult her notes while speaking, she's charmed the regulars. Everyone loves her adorableness. As I manage the diner day by day, I wonder if she might take it over someday.
Mom!
It had been over 6 months since I'd last heard from my daughter, Violet, when her call came through. And it was past 8 p.m. It was rare for Violet, who had her own family, to call at such an hour unless it was daytime. I instinctively felt that something serious must have happened. Violet? What's going on? Calling at this hour? What happened? At first, Violet didn't respond. All I could hear from the other end of the phone was a quiet voice, as if air was leaking out.
Mom!
With a thin voice, as if squeezing it out, Violet finally spoke. Violet. What's wrong? Are you really okay?
Mom, help me!
Realizing it was an emergency, I hit the speaker button on the phone. Immediately, my husband Matthew rushed to my side, listening intently. Violet, pull yourself together. What happened?
It hurts. I haven't eaten anything. I might not make it.
Haven't eaten anything? What do you mean?
I haven't been given anything to eat by Florence and the others.
The image of Violet crawling on the floor, desperately reaching out to me for help, flashed through my mind.
That's too dangerous for you,
Matthew yelled, grabbing the car keys and heading to the door.
I'm coming to get you right now,
I shouted through the phone, hurrying after Matthew. My name is Sierra Smith. I'm 70 years old. Currently, Matthew and I run a steakhouse together. Matthew, having trained in famous restaurants when he was younger, is well regarded for his skills. Matthew and I met through a relative's introduction, and he opened his own restaurant when we got married. Not only is Matthew skilled in his craft, but his adept conversation skills and unpretentious personality have won over many regular customers. It's been nearly 30 years since I started helping out at the shop, but lately, I've begun to feel my body's decline. Perhaps due to age, I've started to feel pain in my back with just a little movement. Matthew has suggested hiring part-time help, but while grateful for his concern, I worry about labor costs and choose to work while I still can. Sometimes, Matthew jokes, it would have been nice to have her around at times like this, referring to our only daughter, Violet. Since she's already independent and has her own family, we can't ask her to come back home and help with the shop. Violet currently lives with her husband Albert, their son Kendrick, and her mother-in-law Florence in the next town over, about an hour's drive from our home. Recently, her sister-in-law Aurora joined them. I don't know the details, but I heard Aurora returned home after her divorce. I had hoped that Violet would help out at our shop after graduating from college, but Violet left home, saying she wanted to see more of the world. After that, she landed a job at a major department store, working in the ladies' clothing section. Though new to the workforce, Violet quickly won over customers with her charm and inherent cheerfulness. It was there she met her future husband, Albert Adams, who worked in the external sales department, dealing primarily with affluent clients purchasing luxury goods, and was considered a star in one of the company's most prestigious divisions. When Violet first introduced me to Albert, I felt a twinge of unease.
Are you sure it's okay to marry such a perfect man?
Indeed, Albert, with his handsome features and skillful conversation that appealed to women, had won over many customers, some of whom visited the store specifically to see him. Yet, Violet seemed unworried. "It's okay, Mom. Don't worry. I trust him." Subsequently, Violet married Albert, and upon doing so, left the department store to devote herself to supporting Albert as a housewife. The following year, the joy of having a grandson, Kendrick, allowed me to breathe a sigh of relief.
It seems, despite everything, those two are doing well.
For a while, the family of 3 lived in an apartment, but 5 years ago, following the death of the father-in-law, they moved to the elderly mother-in-law's house, thinking she would feel lonely by herself. Occasionally, Violet would call home, but she started to lament that Albert was often not around. "Albert stayed over at a colleague's apartment again last night because work was late. It's been happening a lot recently. Even on weekends, he's away for golfing with his college." Still, Violet laughed it off over the phone, suggesting it might just be the fate of a working adult. One day, I decided to call Violet after a long time. "Kendrick's birthday is coming up, right? Do you have any plans for the day?" "So far, we don't have anything planned for the daytime." "What's up?" "Perfect. Our shop is closed that day, so how about the 3 of us go out somewhere? An amusement park or aquarium, somewhere that would make him happy." "That sounds nice. Recently, Albert's been so busy with work, he hardly comes home. Kendrick has been getting bored without being able to go out." Violet sounded excited over the phone, but as Kendrick's birthday approached, she called me. "I'm sorry, Mom. I hate to say this, but some plans have come up since then. We can't go out with you after all. I'm really sorry."
"Plans? What happened?"
"A kids' club has organized a birthday party, so we can't make it that day." "A kids' club, huh? I guess you can't just cancel on them." Though disappointed, I switched gears. "Then it doesn't have to be Kendrick's birthday. Let us know whenever you're free." "I'm sorry, Mom. It doesn't look like we'll be able to go out for a while. Next week, there's a nature class at the kids' club, and the week after that, swimming lessons start. We're just too busy. Elementary school kids these days sure have it tough. It's disappointing, but it seems like giving up is the only option." I had been looking forward to seeing my granddaughter, so my disappointment was significant. I asked some of the parents who are regulars at our restaurant about what gaming consoles are popular with kids these days and sent one to Kendrick. "Mom, the gift arrived. Thank you." I received a thank you call from Violet. However, something about Violet's voice, which I should be familiar with, felt off to me. Maybe it's a mother's intuition, but Violet, usually bright and cheerful, sounded somehow dark and subdued this day. "What's wrong? You sound tired today."
"Not at all. I'm as energetic as ever."
"Is that so? Well, if you say so."
"Anyway, thanks for the gaming console."
"About that. Since I'm not up to date with what elementary school kids like these days, I sent what was recommended to me. Did Kendrick really enjoy it?"
"Of course, he did. He was really happy, saying, "Grandma knows best."
For some reason, Violet seemed in a hurry to end the call, as if she wanted to avoid prolonging our conversation. "Are you guys doing okay?"
Why the sudden concern? We're managing fine. So don't worry about us, Mom.
"You've complained before about Albert coming home late. Has anything changed since then?"
You worry too much. I told you not to mind it. Forget about that. Look, phone calls aren't free, so I'm going to hang up now. You must be busy with the shop, too.
"Just wait a minute. Right now, I'm more concerned about you than..." But before I could finish, Violet had already hung up on me. Just by asking about her well-being, why does Violet seem to reject me this much? It's as if she doesn't want me to probe into her family's affairs, dodging my questions and cutting off the conversation unilaterally. I can't shake the feeling that something is not right. I felt a sense of foreboding. After the shop closes, it has become a routine for Matthew and me to have a quiet drink in the living room. That night, as usual, we relaxed, sharing the weariness of the day. It's about Violet. Something seems off. She seems tired, or maybe lacking energy. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Do you call her sometimes?
I just called her this afternoon, but she cut me off abruptly.
Is she keeping you at a distance?
More like, she doesn't want to worry me. It might just be my mother's intuition, and I might be wrong, but I feel like Violet is hiding something from me. Matthew crossed his arms and fell silent for a moment before speculating.
Could it possibly be related to that?
To what? After hesitating, as if unsure whether to speak, Matthew seemed to make up his mind.
I heard something troubling from one of our regulars about Albert.
What happened with Albert?
The regular mentioned seeing him coming out of a pub with a woman, not Violet.
That can't be. Albert wouldn't do such a thing.
The woman apparently wasn't young but was quite beautiful, dressed flamboyantly in what seemed like expensive brands.
It must be a case of mistaken identity. I said this seemingly in defense of Albert. Not so much to defend Albert, but more so because I didn't want to see a rift form between Violet and him, a sentiment more accurately described as parental concern.
Of course, the regular couldn't be sure it was Albert, just someone who looked somewhat like him.
I didn't want to believe this witness account at face value. Yet, I've heard that Albert has been coming home late and going out more on weekends lately. Could it be that he is seeing another woman behind Violet's back, unknown to us? Without any concrete information, my thoughts inevitably drift towards the worst. I'm worried about Violet. She never complains or shows weakness. If she knows about this and is suffering in silence...
Don't think too negatively. I'll see what I can do. For starters, we know a lawyer among our regulars. I'm thinking of consulting him.
Since then, concern for Violet has preoccupied me daily, to the point of accidentally dropping and breaking dishes. What's wrong? You seem tired yourself. I paused my work to call Violet multiple times, but she rarely answered. When she did, her updates were surprisingly brief, simply saying, "I'm fine." But whenever I tried to delve deeper into family matters, she'd laugh it off and hang up quickly. Each time I heard Violet's voice over the phone, it sounded weaker, as if it might fade away at any moment. Recalling Violet's charming, beloved smile before her marriage, I felt increasingly overwhelmed by my growing anxieties, leading to tears. Then, about half a year later, I received a sudden call from Violet, who had not contacted us for some time. And it was past 8 p.m. Such calls from Violet, now with her own family, were rare at this hour unless it was daytime. I instinctively felt that something serious must have happened. Violet? What's going on? Calling at this hour? What happened? Violet didn't respond. All I could hear from the other end of the phone was a quiet voice, as if air was leaking out. Despite holding the receiver, I was certain it was Violet. Is there anyone around you? Are you alone there? The lack of noisy chatter in the background led me to this conclusion.
Mom!
With a feeble voice, as if squeezing it out, Violet finally spoke. Violet. What's wrong? Are you really okay?
Mom, help me!
Sensing an emergency, I pressed the speakerphone button. Matthew quickly came to my side, listening intently. Violet, pull yourself together. Tell Mom what happened.
It hurts. I haven't eaten anything. I might not make it.
Haven't eaten anything? What do you mean?
I haven't been given anything to eat by Florence and the others.
The image of Violet crawling on the floor, desperately reaching out for my help, flashed through my mind.
Violet is in danger,
Matthew yelled, grabbing the car keys and heading towards the entrance.
I'm coming to get you right now.
I shouted through the phone, quickly following Matthew. During the drive, we were silent the entire time. Matthew kept his mouth shut, gripping the steering wheel, his brows furrowed, veins standing out on his forehead. There was an indescribable anxiety and anger at the possibility that our precious Violet was being subjected to injustice. If I looked in the mirror, I'm sure I would see the same expression on my face as on Matthew's. Holding back the tears, I closed my eyes and saw Violet's innocent, youthful smile. The image of a pure, innocent girl reaching out to Matthew and me with her tiny hands, trying to share happiness, filled me with frustration. Violet was asking for help. Thinking this made us feel incredibly ashamed for not noticing her suffering sooner. Even without seeing her directly, it was clear from her voice on the phone that Violet was severely weakened. I couldn't believe that Violet, who always had a vibrant smile, was now in such a state, calling for help. Looking out the passenger window at the dark town, I thought,
this must be a dream, a bad dream.
Passing through a quiet residential area, the light leaking from each home seemed to carry the laughter of families, reminding me of what Violet in our life should be, which brought more sadness. The journey that usually takes an hour during the day was quicker due to the lack of rush hour traffic, and we soon arrived at the Adams house. Are you okay? If you want, I can go in alone. Matthew spoke kindly, showing concern for me, but this was a problem for our family to face. Preparing for whatever reality awaited us, I resolved. We will definitely save Violet with our own hands. When I rang the doorbell, a carefree voice responded after a pause. Hello? Who is it at this hour? Contrary to the urgent call from Violet, Albert's relaxed and peaceful voice left us puzzled.
It's Smith, Violet's mother.
Upon hearing my name, Albert fell silent, possibly on guard, then slowly asked,
Is there something wrong?
He then cracked the door open slightly, peering out at us standing outside.
I'm sorry for bothering you late at night, Albert. It's urgent, and we need to talk.
Matthew wedged his foot into the slight opening of the door and forcefully pushed it open.
What are you doing, Matthew? We're coming in.
We barged in with a determined attitude, not taking no for an answer. Standing in front of a dimly lit, narrow room at the end of the hallway.
Is Violet in here?
There's no explaining why we thought Violet was in this room, but we instinctively knew she was here, calling out to us for help.
This is outrageous. Even if you are Violet's parents, I'll call the police. Good. That way, the police can witness this too.
Without hesitation, Matthew forcefully slid open the room's door. There, Violet was curled up on the floor, resembling a worn and discarded mop. It took a few seconds for my brain to recognize that it was indeed Violet, so emaciated and altered was her appearance.
Violet! Oh, what has happened to you?
We rushed to Violet, lifting her weakened body in our arms.
Mom, help me! I'm in pain. I can't take it anymore.
Barely speaking between erratic breaths, that's how Violet responded. It was immediately clear that Violet was delirious and suffering from dehydration.
What are you doing here? Leave immediately.
Albert tried to dismiss us as if we were intruders, but his voice lacked any conviction. His gaze wandered as if frightened, and his body trembled.
Albert! Bring some water now! I can't possibly! Don't argue, just do it!
Pressured by my stern shout, Albert ran to the kitchen and quickly returned with a bottle of water from the fridge. I snatched the bottle, opened it. Here, Violet. Drink some water. Alerted by the commotion, Florence and Aurora also appeared. What is all this noise about?
It's so loud I can't hear the TV.
We're the ones who need an explanation here. As Matthew glared at Albert, Albert began to apologize profusely.
I'm so sorry.
Albert then started to explain how Violet ended up in this state, a story beyond our wildest imaginations. It seemed that initially, Violet and Albert had managed well living with Florence. However, at some point, Albert started coming home late, and in response, Florence's attitude towards Violet turned cold. One day, when Violet felt anxious about Albert's late returns, she sought advice from Florence. Instead of addressing her concerns, Florence blamed Violet for Albert's absence. Violet couldn't understand why she was being blamed.
It's because you haven't returned to your pre-pregnancy figure,
Florence told her. Following that, Florence began imposing all household chores on Violet and even restricted her meals. Despite this, Violet remained upbeat, brushing off the unreasonable demands, but it seemed Florence found no amusement in her resilience. The harassment escalated, and under the guise of preventing secret snacking, Florence took control of all Violet's finances. Seeing an opportunity for entertainment, Aurora, the recently divorced sister-in-law, joined in, with Florence assigning her to monitor Violet whenever Florence was away. The hardest part for Violet was being denied the opportunity to care for Kendrick herself. Despite living under the same roof, there was nothing more painful and sad than not being able to raise her own child. Florence forbade Violet from seeing Kendrick and had Aurora stop her whenever she tried to approach his room. While Violet was punished with cleaning duties, Florence spent joyful moments with Kendrick. "This is all I know," Albert said, collapsing to his knees, powerless.
Don't speak of our family's shame so lightly. How could you discuss such trivial matters with strangers?
Albert, you've become so weak.
That's not all, is it? There's more you're hiding, right?
Albert looked up, his face flashing with panic. Just then, a taxi stopped at the entrance, and someone alighted.
They've arrived.
The Addams family was confused, unable to grasp the situation. Soon, a slender gentleman in his 50s appeared, causing Albert's face to turn pale.
It seems you recognize this gentleman, don't you?
Albert didn't answer, realizing he was in a situation with no escape. He waited silently, letting time pass. "Good evening.
My name is Kevin Watson. I believe this is the first time I've had the pleasure of meeting the Addams family in person."
Kevin Watson introduced himself, looking at each member of the Addams family in turn. In his youth, Kevin Watson was a popular actor known to everyone, starring in movies and dramas. As he aged, his popularity waned, leaving only his name known to the public.
"Why is Mr. Kevin Watson at our home?"
Florence, representing the Addams family, asked, her smile strained and her voice high-pitched with clear agitation. It was clear to anyone that she was visibly shaken.
It was I who invited Mr. Watson here. Before coming, I contacted a lawyer acquaintance and asked Mr. Watson to join us as well. And what exactly is the relationship between Mr. Watson and us?
Florence attempted to feign ignorance, but I smirked and said,
Don't pretend you don't know anything. You must have some idea why Mr. Watson is here.
The lawyer arrived shortly after, apologizing for his delay.
Sorry for being late. I was organizing some documents for another case, and it took longer than expected.
The arrival of the lawyer silenced the Addams family.
In fact, at Sierra's request, I've been investigating Albert's personal life for the past 6 months. It turns out, Albert has been frequently meeting a certain woman, a wealthy client at the department store where Albert works. And upon investigating this woman, we uncovered a shocking truth. That woman happens to be my wife, Hillary Sanders.
Kevin Watson added in a calm tone to the lawyer's explanation.
When my wife brought up divorce, I was initially surprised, but deep down, I felt, of course. She had been going out secretly for a while. After hearing the details from this lawyer, everything made sense. So, we decided to come here to hear directly from Mr. Albert, the party involved.
Albert slowly stood up, and in a frail voice, as if devoid of spirit, began to tell everything.
My relationship with Hillary started, as mentioned earlier, through her being a major client at the department store and me being the attendant. Over the years of working visits to her home, we developed a relationship. Initially, it was just a fling for me, but then it was revealed Hillary was pregnant, and we realized we couldn't turn back. We discussed leaving our partners to remarry. I'm truly sorry.
At Kevin Watson's feet, filled with indignation, Albert collapsed powerlessly.
When I was a celebrated actor, adored by the public, Hillary would always greet me with her brightest smile. But now that my work has dwindled, meeting a handsome man like you must have been irresistible for her. She's the type who must have everything she likes.
Kevin Watson said with a weary smile. Albert, who wanted a divorce from Violet, was in a bind because filing for divorce while having an affair would lead to a hefty compensation claim against him. So, he turned to Florence for help. Initially, Florence resisted the idea of divorce due to how it would look but changed her tune completely upon learning the other woman was wealthy. Thinking there would be no need to pay compensation if Violet, the daughter-in-law, initiated the divorce, Florence began to torment her relentlessly, hoping to drive her out of the house.
I believed you, but you...
Violet, staggering yet standing firm on her feet, expressed her frustration loudly, tears streaming down her face.
I believed that if I lost weight, Albert would return to me. That's why I endured all the unreasonable demands from Florence and Aurora. To think it was all a scheme to drive me out.
It's okay. You've done nothing wrong. You don't have to push yourself anymore. I embraced Violet tightly.
I did want to divorce Violet, that's true. But I never imagined Mom and Aurora could be this cruel to her. I'm utterly disillusioned. Wait just a minute. I was only trying to help you by getting Violet out of this house. It's your fault for having an affair in the first place. That's right. Albert, you've been silently condoning what we've been doing. Don't act like you were oblivious to it all now.
As the three of them argued, I was speechless, but Violet, trembling with anger, shouted,
Enough! If you so desperately wanted me out of here, I'll leave on my own.
Oh, that would be a relief.
You're mistaken to be pleased, Florence. I will never forgive you. Once we're divorced, I will indeed demand a substantial amount in compensation, just so you know."
With that, Violet called out with a voice that echoed through the house.
"Kendrick, where are you? Come here, we're going to live with Mom and Grandpa and Grandma from now on."
"Okay, coming." Kendrick cheerfully ran down the stairs and hugged Violet. Subsequently, Albert, exposed for his affair with a client, was dismissed from his company for severely damaging the corporate image. Following her declaration, Violet filed for divorce and sued Albert for a significant amount in compensation. After losing his job and being ordered to pay compensation for the divorce, Albert, following a major argument with Florence and Aurora, was forced to reluctantly sell the house. Violet's anger did not subside with this. She also demanded substantial compensation from Florence and Aurora for the mental and physical distress they caused her. Despite the harassment from Florence and Aurora, Violet had meticulously documented the daily events in a notebook, which proved advantageous in court. Returning to her parents' home, Violet gradually healed both mentally and physically, reverting to her cheerful self. There were ongoing issues with the Addams family, but with the help of a skilled lawyer, everything was resolved. I heard through the grapevine that Albert and Hillary had a child. After losing his job and the house, Albert, supported by Hillary's wealth but devoid of the will to work, grew increasingly unkempt. Moreover, with the elderly Florence and the nagging Aurora joining them, Hillary, raised in luxury, could not stand it and eventually left with the child. What became of the Addams family after Hillary left is neither within my knowledge nor my interest.
"Well, I've slacked off enough. Time to get to work."
With renewed determination, Violet started helping out at the store, taking over for me as I struggled with back pain. Having worked in customer service at a major department store, Violet's reputation quickly made our shop a local sensation, drawing long lines of customers. With our new promotional model in place, I have no regrets. I stepped back from the storefront, spending my free time watching over Kendrick as much as possible. Kendrick, soon to be a middle schooler, declared at his elementary school graduation, "I want to be a cool chef like Grandpa." His proclamation brought Matthew and me to tears. We are now eagerly looking forward to his future.
Finally, the nuisance is gone. From today, we're living with my parents at my house.
Matthew's words hung in the air as I stood dumbfounded in front of our demolished family home, right after my parents had passed away.
"What are you talking about?
Have you lost your mind too? Hurry up and bring the inheritance over to my place." I couldn't help but burst into laughter at his words. "I see. So that's what this was about." "What? Why are you laughing?"
"You guys don't know?"
"Know what?" As I laughed, Matthew and the in-laws looked at me quizzically. It was then that I decided to tell them the truth. My name is Madison. I was born the eldest daughter in a family of ordinary full-time working parents. I have one older brother. A perfectly normal family. At 29, I married my husband Matthew, and we had 2 children. Juggling work and child-rearing, before I knew it, I was already 55. Our son, Kenneth, and our daughter, Amelia, had grown up and become respectable members of society. They were both living on their own, struggling with their new careers. Now it was time for Matthew and me to enjoy some peace. It was a plain life, but a happy one. I had always thought we would continue to age together like this. But then, one winter day, everything changed. Dad was in a traffic accident and passed away suddenly. He was only 72 at the time. Our family was engulfed in sorrow, especially since Dad had been so healthy. Mom was particularly devastated, hardly able to eat. "Mom, I know you're sad, but you have to eat." I kept telling Mom this over and over. "I know, but I just don't have an appetite. It feels like there's a lump in my chest." My brother and I thought Mom was just going through a rough emotional patch, so we watched her for a while. But then, Mom's weight started to drop rapidly in just half a month. Worried, I decided to take her to the hospital.
What? Cancer?
I was stunned when the doctor diagnosed Mom with cancer. It was advanced and inoperable, and she only had about a year left. I hadn't been able to do enough for my parents yet. Just when I thought we had only lost Dad, now Mom was going through this. I was even more devastated than when Dad passed away. But there was no time to stay sad forever. My brother lived far away and couldn't be relied upon. So, it was up to me to help Mom. I immediately told Matthew that I wanted to live with Mom. I couldn't leave Mom alone, both emotionally and physically, in her illness. But Matthew's reaction was not what I expected.
What? We just finished the funeral, and now I have to deal with your parents again?
Matthew said this with a sigh, sounding annoyed.
You don't have to say it like that. Isn't it enough to just drive her to and from the hospital? Why do we have to live together? I think she'll feel lonely. If it's not okay, maybe I can live at my parents' house for a while?
I suggested. Then, Matthew said indignantly.
What? And who's going to take care of my meals then? I'll come over to cook, of course. What about cleaning? Laundry? Who's going to do all that?
I was rendered speechless. I intended to do what I could, but I couldn't handle everything as usual. His pointed remarks hurt. I couldn't argue back if someone said that my desire to help and nurse Mom was just my selfishness. I knew Mom would probably hesitate and insist that everything should stay the same. But I desperately wanted to show my filial piety.
Fine, but I'm not helping with anything, understand?
Matthew grudgingly said this to me, who was silent. Although his attitude was arrogant, he had ultimately given in.
I'm sorry, and thank you.
Even though I thought he was being quite terrible, he had agreed to my request. I held back my desire to retort and expressed my gratitude. Despite the disagreement, Matthew and I started living with Mom at my parents' home. We had been living in company housing provided by Matthew's company. Matthew was an only child. Thomas had expressed a desire to live together, so there were no plans to buy a home, and eventually, we were supposed to live in the in-laws' house. While he was still working, the company housing was more convenient for commuting, and the rent was only about $300 a month, not a significant burden. However, moving to my parents' house eliminated that expense, and the house was more spacious. I think living together wasn't all downsides for Matthew. As he had declared, Matthew didn't help with anything, but I was happy to be able to live with Mom. Mom seemed energetic, but she often felt weak and spent a lot of time lying down during the day. I prepare meals for Mom and make sure she eats them. I also arrange her medication. Doing all this alone would have been impossible for Mom.
I'm sorry, Madison. Thank you. It's a big help to have you here. I should thank Matthew too.
Mom expressed her gratitude to us many times. I hadn't told her about the harsh words Matthew had said when we decided to live together, so she seemed grateful to him as well. One evening, after Mom had gone to bed and Matthew had come home, I served him dinner and said,
"About Mom's treatment."
But Matthew glared at me and said,
"Don't tell me about it. I don't want to hear it. I told you I'm not helping."
And refused to listen. I too wanted to vent or seek advice from someone. All I wanted was for Matthew to just listen. Matthew's attitude didn't change, not after a month, nor after 2. He complained about living with my mother, acting as if he was doing a great favor by agreeing to it. His behavior became increasingly arrogant and dismissive day by day. But I couldn't really say anything in response. The stress of worrying about Mom and being considerate of Matthew was building up. Around the time when a year had passed since Mom's terminal diagnosis, her health rapidly deteriorated, and she was hospitalized. 3 days later, she passed away. Despite being mentally prepared, I was deeply saddened. My brother's family and my children rushed to support me, but in times like these, you really want your spouse by your side. However, Matthew just laughed and chatted with the in-laws in a corner, not helping with the funeral at all. My brother took on the role of the chief mourner, and we somehow managed to prepare for the funeral. But Matthew sat at the very back of the relative seats when he should be seated at the bereaved family seats.
Matthew, I'd like you to sit in the bereaved family seats.
When I said this, Matthew replied, "No, I'm fine here. I'm not a blood relative after all."
But you are my husband.
Then Addison, who was listening to our conversation, chimed in.
He may be your husband, but he's not your mom's son, right?
Matthew is my son, so he's an outsider. That's right. We're Matthew's only parents. You can sit in the bereaved family seats, Madison. Hearing the in-laws say this, I fell silent. While traditions may vary by region, in our area, it's customary for sons-in-law to sit in the bereaved family seats. As expected, when relatives noticed Matthew wasn't in the bereaved family seats, I overheard whispers like, "Did they get divorced?" It was embarrassing, and while those gossiping were at fault too, it would have been resolved if Matthew had just sat there. I felt a bit resentful that Matthew wasn't by my side, but we managed to give Mom a proper send-off. After the funeral, we returned home with my brother's family, my children, Matthew, and the in-laws.
Thomas, Addison, thank you for coming during this busy time.
I expressed my gratitude to the in-laws and served them coffee. Then, they said, laughing, "Really though? First your father passed away, and now your mother. It's been quite costly for us too. But at least it's over now." I was stunned by their words. How could they say such things? I couldn't believe what they were saying. I forced a smile and left the room, trying my best to keep my composure. Then, as I walked away, I could hear the conversation between the in-laws and Matthew behind me.
Matthew, it must have been hard for you, living with someone else's family.
Yeah, Madison's stubbornness was quite a challenge.
You shouldn't always give in to your wife. It's okay to say no in a marriage.
I clenched my fist. Their voices, chatting and laughing, filled me with anger and frustration, but this wasn't new. The in-laws had always been insensitive and rude. When I married Matthew, couldn't you have found someone more attractive? I worry about the grandkids' looks, Addison declared. They say beauty bores you after 3 days. With Madison, that's unlikely to happen, he said. Matthew laughed at these rude comments. It was a pattern with this family. Something in me snapped. I realized that neither the in-laws nor Matthew had ever said a word of comfort to me, not during Dad's funeral, nor after Mom passed. Instead, they mocked me. Matthew's behavior and attitude as a person started to raise questions in my mind. I thought I had been too considerate towards Matthew when all I wanted was to do something for Mom. If Matthew had been supportive towards me, it would be one thing. But he wasn't, and there was absolutely no reason for me to feel so guilty towards him. My growing anger was overshadowed by the ongoing laughter and chit-chat of the in-laws and Matthew in the background. If my brother's family or the kids had overheard them, they would have been upset, but luckily, they were all in the kitchen. I was the only one who heard their conversation since I was in a different room, which was a relief. As I was contemplating all this, Addison's voice once again reached my ears.
Madison.
Yes? I turned to respond.
Can I take this?
Addison was holding Mom's handbag. I was perplexed, not understanding what was meant by that. Addison responded to me, saying,
Your mom can't use it anymore, right? Matthew said it's okay to take it.
Addison was examining the bag as if appraising it. It was so disrespectful, especially right after the funeral. I took the bag away. No, you can't.
Huh?
Her expression changed, showing not just anger about having the bag taken away, but also that I, her daughter-in-law, had dared to stand up to her. Despite the intensity of her expression, I stood my ground and responded with equal determination. We're not ready to go through Mom's belongings yet.
we'll divide her things among family members later.
Addison was furious.
What? Are you saying I'm an outsider? Didn't you just say at the funeral that even Matthew was an outsider? How does that make you family?
I couldn't help but retort. Hearing my words, Matthew and Thomas also turned red.
What are you saying? Apologize to Mom. How rude for a wife to say such things.
Hearing the commotion, everyone else came from the other room.
After all the effort we put in, attending the funeral and cremation, to be called an outsider. Let's go, Thomas.
Addison yelled at me in front of everyone and left our house. Matthew, too, angrily left with the in-laws.
What happened? Did you really say they were outsiders to Mom?
Everyone, having heard only Addison's words, said that to me. Indeed, if only that part of the conversation was considered, it might sound like I was the one being unreasonable. However, I explained the entire situation to everyone. Not a single person blamed me.
Grandma and Grandpa should have been more considerate. Dad's just the same. They've always been like that.
My kids stood by me, but I couldn't forgive those three. Matthew didn't come home for a while. And I didn't contact him. I felt it wasn't right for me to apologize, and I wasn't ready to forgive. However, I knew I couldn't stay like this forever. One day, as I was pondering this, Matthew came home.
Welcome back.
Seeing his face reignited my anger, but I suppressed it and greeted Matthew. Then, Matthew said,
It's been tough, hasn't it?
His awkward attempt at consolation surprised me.
Take the kids on a trip. It'll be a good change of pace.
He handed me travel vouchers. I was speechless. And tears welled up. Maybe the kids had influenced him. But I was happy he went along with it. I immediately contacted my children to plan the trip.
Dad did?
That's unusual. They were surprised by my suggestion. It seemed to be genuinely from Matthew.
I wonder if Dad feels sorry,
I said, smiling. And so, I gratefully accepted the trip offered by Matthew. I'll be going then.
Sure. Take it easy. Why not stay at the kids' places while you're at it?
Really? I can't be away that long.
It's fine. I'll relax at my parents' house, so don't worry about me.
Matthew said this as he saw me off. Amelia was happy to have me visit, so before the trip, I went to Amelia's and then Kenneth's place. Since I hadn't been able to visit them while caring for Mom, I helped them a bit with household chores, like preparing some meals for them to freeze.
Mom, you're not really resting, are you? But it's a big help. Thank you.
Both of them were delighted to have my home-cooked meals. This was all thanks to Matthew's suggestion. Then came the long-awaited trip. I spent a relaxing time with my children at our destination. It seemed to heal the fatigue from caregiving and the sorrow of losing my parents. Although I was away for almost a week, both children returned to their homes with bright smiles.
It was fun. We should thank Dad once in a while.
Yeah, once in a while. But I wonder if he's up to something? Amelia said this with a joking tone.
Don't say that. Dad thought about it in his own way.
I laughed along with them. I planned to return home and share all these memories with Matthew, looking forward to a happy life together as a couple. But when I arrived home, I was speechless.
What's going on? Where's the house?
I looked around in disbelief, confirming my location. Despite being in a familiar place, my parents' house was gone. Then, Matthew appeared out of nowhere. The in-laws were behind him. They were wearing smug smiles, while I could only stand there.
Matthew, what's happening?
I asked Matthew, bewildered. Matthew, with a similarly unsettling smile as the in-laws, said,
Finally, the nuisance is gone. Now, it's time to live with my parents at my house. What are you talking about?
I replied calmly to Matthew's arrogant statement. Then, Matthew continued.
Have you lost your mind too? Your family home has been demolished.
Hurry up and bring your inheritance to my place. Whatever you inherited is ours now. I realized then. The reason our house was gone was Matthew's doing, and it was all for the inheritance. Despite having thought about the future on my way home, what a betrayal it was. I was overwhelmed with frustration and sadness. But even if they went to the lengths of demolishing the house, they wouldn't get their way. I wouldn't let them. I burst into laughter at the faces of the three, who were still sporting their smug smiles. My laughter seemed to confuse Thomas and Matthew, leaving them looking bewildered. What? Why are you laughing? What a weird woman. Has she gone crazy? Addison looked at me as if I were something bizarre. I faced the three of them and said, "You guys don't know?" "Know what?" I then told Matthew. "I didn't inherit anything at all. So there's no inheritance." I started laughing again after saying this. They must have mistakenly thought they would become rich from the inheritance. Their baseless assumptions and actions were so ludicrous, I couldn't stop laughing. "What do you mean? Explain yourself." Matthew demanded an explanation. But I chose to remain silent. I saw no need to enlighten them. Before that, let me say this. I won't live with strangers. If you want to live together, do it on your own. Instead of answering Matthew's question and refusing his initial proposal, Addison erupted in anger. "You helped your own parents with their housework, but you can't help us? You do understand there was a reason for that, right? I agreed to live together, didn't I? I said it wasn't necessary for us to live together. Have you forgotten that you chose to live together just to avoid housework?" Matthew and Addison bit their lips as I countered their arguments. "And demolishing my family home without permission, there are things you just don't do." I reprimanded the three of them. And then left the place. Behind me, Matthew called out, "Where are you going?" His voice rang out. But I didn't turn back. I needed to find a place to sleep for the night, and I really didn't want to see Matthew's face. I immediately consulted a lawyer. It's not that easy to just demolish a house. The house was still in Mom's name. As I wondered which company had taken on the demolition, an unbelievable truth came to light. Matthew and Thomas had directly demolished the house themselves. Thomas had asked a friend who worked at a demolition heavy machinery, even rented heavy machinery. It was all meticulously planned. Moreover, they had given me the travel vouchers to get rid of me. I felt pathetic for being so easily deceived and was incredibly angry. "Is there any way to punish these three?" I asked the lawyer with tears in my eyes. The lawyer smiled kindly at me. "For demolishing a house in your mother's name without permission, Matthew can be charged with property destruction, and you can claim damages. Let's start there and get Matthew and his parents to properly apologize." I nodded at the lawyer's words. The lawyer then immediately began the legal process. A few days later, after learning about the situation, an enraged Matthew called me. "What's this legal notice about?" "Oh, you received it? You destroyed an important house, so naturally, you need to compensate." "Compensate? We told you we were moving into our family home. We demolished a house nobody was going to live in. Instead of compensation, you should be thanking us. Now, bring whatever inheritance you have and come back home." Matthew arrogantly retorted. "Thank you for demolishing my house without permission? Don't make me laugh. And as for bringing the inheritance, there's none to bring since I didn't inherit anything." I shouted back at him over the phone. Matthew remained silent. It seemed he was startled by my raised voice, something unusual for me who rarely shouts. The reason I laughed when the house was demolished was precisely this. I had spent a year living with Mom. It was obvious we would have discussed inheritance. I had said to Mom, "I don't need anything. Give it all to my brother." So, my brother inherited everything, including the cash and securities. Instead, he had offered me the house, saying he lived far away and couldn't manage it. If I wasn't going to live there, it could be rented out. And so, I was supposed to inherit the house.
Either you and Thomas restore the family home to its original state, or pay the amount specified in the notice. This amount! I'm being generous by offering a settlement. If you can't pay, I'll file a complaint and sue you.
I spoke firmly.
Sorry. I didn't expect you to be so angry. Of course I'm angry.
Matthew started making excuses. He had thought that if my family home remained, he couldn't live with his parents. Thomas, in particular, had been hoping to live together for a long time. He took a liking to Kenneth and seemed to want to live with him. It was Matthew who refused to live together at that time, citing the difficulty of commuting, but the in-laws seemed to be under the impression that it was I who was against it, unaware of the real reason. So, they thought demolishing my family home and taking the inheritance would force me to move in with them. However, hearing this now didn't make it any more forgivable.
So, please forgive me. I didn't mean any harm. Dad is remorseful too. If you're truly remorseful, then accept the settlement.
I said this and hung up the phone. Matthew kept calling and sending messages, apologizing.
If you're sorry, then just transfer the money quickly.
I pushed Matthew away with these words. I knew the family home couldn't be restored, but demanding compensation was the only way I could process my feelings. Afterward, I stayed at Amelia's house. My brother's family and my children were aware of the situation. Even though my brother must have been angry about the house being demolished without permission.
I won't interfere, but I'll help if you need it. Do what you think is right, Madison,
he said. Everyone condemned Matthew's actions and supported me. A month passed without any payment of the deposit or damages. And there was no contact from Matthew. I couldn't rely on Amelia forever. I wanted to get the money and at least establish a stable living situation. Contrary to my wishes, something unbelievable happened. It was revealed to me through Amelia's casual remark.
This apron looks like Grandma's, doesn't it?
Amelia said this while showing me her mobile phone screen. Upon seeing the screen, I was taken aback. It was a free market app's product page. The apron that Amelia said resembled my mom's was actually a unique one I had made for her.
How can this be? That is Grandma's apron. I made it, so I'm sure of it. What?
Amelia quickly started checking other pages. The seller seemed to have recently registered, with 0 transaction counts and ratings. There were nearly 30 items listed for sale, and to my shock, all of them belonged to Mom. I immediately realized what was happening. It was Matthew's doing. He was the only one who could have taken Mom's belongings after demolishing the house. I called Matthew right away.
What's with that app?
App? Matthew responded with an air of inconvenience. Fuming, I didn't let him play ignorant.
Don't play dumb. You're selling Mom's things, aren't you? Cancel those listings right now.
Then, Matthew seemed to panic.
What? No, it's not me. Who else would do such a thing? I'm coming over to get everything back.
I hung up and immediately headed to the in-laws' house with Amelia.
Where are Mom's belongings?
As soon as we arrived at the in-laws' house, I called out for Matthew. We were met at the entrance.
I don't know anything about it. Dad, tell the truth.
Amelia backed me up, confronting Matthew. He looked troubled. As we were talking, the in-laws noticed our presence and came out.
Oh, Amelia, you're here?
Addison seemed pleased to see Amelia. But Amelia, visibly angry, confronted her.
Grandma, tell Dad to be honest. Honest about what? It seems Dad is selling Grandma's stuff that was left when she passed away.
At Amelia's words, Addison laughed. Matthew, looking troubled, furrowed his brow and repeated.
It's really not me.
Then, Addison said loudly.
Matthew is selling them? That's impossible. But because I'm the one selling them.
I felt as if the blood had drained from my face at her words. Matthew must have known. He looked at Addison with an expression that screamed trouble. Even as Amelia stood there in shock, Addison seemed cheerful.
What did you say? It's quite a lot of work, you know? I have to pack things carefully and take good photos for the listings.
Addison talked about the app as if it were an enjoyable hobby, seemingly oblivious to the fact she was selling stolen items. Had to restrain myself from lashing out at her.
Cancel the listings. Those items aren't yours to sell.
Amelia, now red-faced and teary, pleaded with Addison. But Addison looked displeased. What's the big deal?
I've found a fun hobby. I use what I can and sell what I can't for a little pocket money. It's good for preventing dementia. Besides, I'm the only grandma left. Amelia, you want me to stay healthy and live a long life, right?
Addison said this without any hint of remorse. Even as we appealed to her to stop, she showed no signs of regret. If talking won't work, then action is the only option. Amelia, let's go.
But
it's fine. Let's leave. I practically dragged Amelia out of the house and went straight to the police station. Although I hadn't intended to report the demolition of the house, theft was a different matter. I explained to the police that Mom's belongings were stolen and being sold. They acted immediately, and the free market app suspended Addison's account. At least now, no more items could be sold. On the way back from the police station, I called Matthew.
I had Addison's account suspended.
You knew about this, right?
That makes you complicit. No, I've filed a report with the police. I expect you to cooperate with the investigation.
Matthew became frantic at my words.
But we're family. Please withdraw it. Family? You still haven't paid for the damage you caused to my house, and I don't see any signs of remorse.
Matthew was troubled by my angry retort. However, I wasn't heartless. Despite everything with the in-laws, there was a history with Matthew that couldn't be ignored. Sighing, I said,
I'll wait for the money, but I won't forgive the theft. Everything must be returned. Also, Thomas looked quite ill. Has he been to the hospital? What? I'm not a monster. Just make sure he gets that message,
I said, and hung up the phone. I saw Thomas for the first time in a while. He barely spoke and looked significantly thinner than just a few months ago. His complexion was beyond pale, almost ashen. It was clear he wasn't healthy. But that family seemed oblivious. Addison focused on selling stolen goods and Matthew only putting on a brave face for me. They lacked basic empathy. The next day, Thomas called me. I expected gratitude but got the opposite.
Why are you treating me like a sick person? Planning to shove me in a hospital to get rid of me? I have to protect Addison and Matthew from you. I won't go to the hospital.
He was scolding me. Here I was, concerned about him, and this was his response.
I apologize if I overstepped. I was just worried. I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents. Don't insult me.
His words irritated me, but a few days later, he apparently felt unwell enough to visit the hospital. The diagnosis was terminal cancer. Matthew, in a panic, called me.
Dad's got terminal cancer. What am I going to do?
But I just snorted in response.
I don't want to hear it. Do you know what he said when I suggested going to the hospital? I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents.
Do as you please.
How can you be so heartless, Madison?
Who's the heartless one?
Did you ever say a kind word to my mom when she was sick? Reflect on your own actions.
I said this and hung up the phone. As expected, Thomas soon passed away. I didn't want to hold negative feelings towards someone who passed away, but I couldn't muster any tears for him, remembering all he had done and said. After his funeral, his will was discovered. The man who insisted he wasn't short-lived had everything meticulously planned.
The house goes to my grandson, Kenneth. The rest of the estate is to be split between my wife and eldest son.
I was surprised to hear Kenneth's name. Thomas had always favored Kenneth and wanted to live with him. Perhaps he hoped Kenneth would live in the house after he was gone. To Kenneth, this might have been an inconvenience. "You should renounce the inheritance. You don't need that house." I advised Kenneth, but he was happy to receive it. The inheritance tax was a burden, and there seemed to be no benefit for Kenneth. However, he was pleased, so I decided not to interfere further. Kenneth inherited the house as per Thomas's will. Addison seemed pleased and paid the inheritance tax.
"He's our heir, after all. It's only natural,"
she said. Well, that's not incorrect. I was a bit downcast, feeling like I had lost Kenneth, but then something unbelievable happened.
"Come to our place."
I received this message from Matthew and immediately went to the in-laws' house. There, like me once, stood Addison and Matthew, stunned in front of the house. In front of me, on the grounds of the in-laws' house, there was a truck with Matthew's name on it, along with employees. And there, right before my eyes, the in-laws' house was being demolished.
"What's happening?" "It's my house. I can do whatever I want with it, right?"
Kenneth, appearing out of nowhere, watched the demolition of the family home with satisfaction.
"Kenneth, what are you doing? Stop this right now. Even if I stop them now, it's not like anyone can live here anymore." "Kenneth, what have you done?"
Addison and Matthew pleaded with Kenneth. But he just laughed.
"Have you forgotten what Grandpa and Dad did to Mom?" "Kenneth."
"Grandma, did you apologize for what you did to Mom?" Kenneth's smile vanished, replaced by a piercing glare at Addison and Matthew. The two of them sank to their knees. The heavy machinery continued to noisily dismantle the in-laws' house. I finally felt a sense of relief. Later, Matthew finally paid the damages and the security deposit using the inherited assets. It turned out Kenneth had recovered the items Addison stole from Mom, and they were safely returned to me. "Mom, you have me and Amelia. Don't worry." I shed tears of relief at his words. Addison and Matthew, having lost their home and with no money left, were now back in company housing. Matthew and I left the company housing. And now, returning to it with his mother, they've become the talk of the town. People are wondering what happened. I received such a message from the wife of a colleague of Matthew, who I'm on good terms with. So, I decided to tell her the whole truth, without any deception. The two of them will probably feel awkward from now on, but it's their own responsibility. Furthermore, after Matthew's resignation, the two, having lost their place to live, are now forced to economize in preparation for their new home. Occasionally, I'm considering asking my friends about how the two are faring, just for some conversation. Meanwhile, I continued to stay at Amelia's house, but then Kenneth decided to get married. He plans to build a new home. The land where the in-laws' house stood sold for a good price, which was unexpectedly beneficial.
"Mom, come live with us."
Furthermore, Kenneth said that to me. His wife-to-be expressed her warm welcome to the idea, which I found very heartening. Since I couldn't stay with Amelia forever, I gratefully accepted his offer. Determined not to end up like Addison, I look forward to living happily with my new family. Being a husband's housekeeper, and if you defy, I'll divorce you. That's what Tyler, who stole my black card and went on a spending spree, threatened me with. Taking advantage of my being at work, he's off gallivanting on overseas vacations. I can't stand being mocked by such a ridiculous man. Sure. At my wit's end, I dismiss a call from Tyler and set out to enact a terrifying plan of revenge. My name is Harper. A former actress, I was a star who swept the nation. Having appeared in international dramas, I was once reported overseas as captivating men around the world. My popularity back then was extraordinary. My retirement from the entertainment world came about when I married Tyler, my then manager. He was my rock, skillfully supporting me as I tirelessly traveled the globe. He took care of everything, from my health to my personal life. Even after leaving showbiz, he's been a great help with the business I'm currently handling. Now, we collaborate and run a company related to apparel. I retired from the entertainment industry to marry him, and that was 10 years ago when I was 21. At the height of my fame, my retirement announcement had the media swarming my house daily. Even fanatical fans showed up. Every day, I received letters begging me not to quit, and my departure even caused a societal stir. Rumors and various media coverage abounded, but Tyler and I, oblivious to public opinion, married at the peak of our happiness. Everyone around me supported this decision. Just before retiring, I launched my own apparel brand, and now Tyler works there as an employee. I've entrusted him with the finances, while I, as a president, market our models. Though our life seems perfect, it's been far from it lately. Tyler's been acting strange. He comes home exhausted, sighing heavily, and gazes at me with an indescribable look. "What's wrong, Tyler? You've been down lately. Trouble at work?" I've always understood that he tends to internalize things. That's why, during our time together, I often try to gauge his mood. It seems he struggles to voice his worries and complaints on his own, always waiting for me to intuitively act. Sure, there are times when this feels bothersome, but I've never really resented it. After all, he has dealt with more troublesome things because of me. Gratitude, I suppose, has always outweighed any annoyance. I'm tired of always being the sidekick, always following your orders. His words, so unlike the expected work-related complaints, shook me. "What's this all of a sudden? You've never mentioned this before." He often deliberately spoke in a way that hurt me. He starts saying these things when his work gets busy. Since he's always so firm at work, I guess he doesn't have a place to vent. I remember venting to him numerous times when I was an actress. So, I understand how he feels. But still, being confronted with such unexpected words, my voice trembled with disturbance. I've been holding back. You are busy, and I'm the one being taken care of, if you think about it. He earns decently, but after all, he's just an employee at my company. I'm the higher earner. I never thought income mattered in our marriage, so his words were a shock to me.
Even when you come home, it's all about work. You hardly pay any attention to me. When we go shopping together, you buy whatever you want without a second thought. How do you think I feel watching that? I'm actually quite patient. Why can't you be more considerate?"
He, pouting like a spoiled child, looked at me with dissatisfaction. Honestly, his words irritated me. Our household mostly runs on my income. I told him he could do whatever he wanted with his salary. It's my way of thanking him for all the trouble he's gone through for me. There were times when we were poor, and he supported and provided for me. I thought I was repaying him for all his sacrifices, even until the day I retired, by letting him use his time as he pleased. It's heartbreaking to hear such ungrateful words from him. The clothes and accessories I buy during our shopping trips are from money I saved. If anything, I'm the one who's been holding back. These thoughts flash through my mind, and anger starts to build within me.
"Harper, you're just too free. I want more time off, and I'd like to travel leisurely. The job at the company pays well but leaves no time. I joined your company specifically to ease your burden. Don't I deserve some gratitude? Instead of prioritizing your time, give me some time to rest too."
When I retired, he chose to continue in the entertainment industry as a manager, staying behind while I left. But when my business started taking off after we got married, Tyler changed his mind and wanted to be my support. "If I join the company, you won't be lonely, right? I want to be there for you, Harper." Since I wanted to spend more time with him, I agreed to let him join our company. I never asked him to join, so why am I being treated like this? Isn't this life enough? Isn't he being too selfish? While I was pondering this, he made a proposal that felt like a final blow. "Hey, my parents are turning 60 soon. Can I take some time off for their celebration? That's all I ask. No more demands from me, but I'll need 2 weeks off. I want to take them on an overseas trip. They've never been to Mexico, and I want to show them the delicious food and beautiful sights there. I was taken aback by his unexpected request and felt a sense of discomfort. A 2-week vacation could be easily taken by using paid leave. Our company is known for its easy vacation policies. There's no reason for such a confrontational approach unless something else is going on. Despite this, the fact that he would come to me directly with such a hostile attitude for negotiation struck me as odd. I thought so, but it was just a hunch. There was nothing concrete to prove this uneasy feeling. While suppressing my irritation, I calmly responded, "That's fine, but I can't join you this year. There's an important fashion show for our models and the Paris collection needs preparation. Can you ask if next year works? I'll adjust my schedule then." As his wife, I can't miss my parents-in-law's 60th birthday celebration. But this year, our company has 2 major events, and I can't afford the time to travel. I suggested postponing, but he refused with a smile. "That's fine. I'll just go with my family. I want to spend some time with them. As the accountant, my absence won't disrupt the work too much." His reference to family pained me, as if implying I'm an obstacle. So, how about it? I deserve some free time too, right? He has always been someone who speaks without malice, often impulsively. His honesty and straightforwardness are some of his good traits, but sometimes he speaks too hastily. No one is perfect, and I chose him as my partner, flaws included, but this way of speaking is just too much. Even if he doesn't intend it, why do I have to be spoken to like this? Doesn't he care about me at all? Harper? Are you listening to me? Despite this, I've always received great care from my parents-in-law. I can't often visit their house due to work, but when I do, they treat me like their own daughter, always praising my work. I'm so happy to have such a proud daughter. Samantha, my mother-in-law, expressed joy since I married, and Cody, my father-in-law, also celebrated our marriage with happiness. It's their birthday celebration, after all. I understand his desire to celebrate it this year. But how can I respond positively after being spoken to in such a manner? "It's no problem. Take 1 or 2 weeks, whatever you prefer." Unable to bear his harsh words, I let my anger show. This must have been the turning point for Tyler. He stood up, irritated, and left the living room without a word. We have separate bedrooms due to our work schedules. From that day until his departure for the trip, we didn't see each other at all. Is that really true? Isn't Tyler being too harsh? Mia, my secretary, noticed something was off on the day Tyler left for his trip and pressed me for details. Mia is truly a talented individual and has been a support since I started running the company. As women, we often share the same opinions, and I trust her perhaps even more than Tyler. She's adept at sensing my moods and quick to assist when I'm down or about to make a mistake. I dote on Mia like family. She looks up to me like a sister, and I often consult with her. Her candid advice is always helpful. And now, noticing my unusual demeanor, she expressed her concern. I hesitated at first to tell her everything, but if I continued working like this, it could affect my performance. I decided to confide in her about everything that had happened up to today. She furrowed her brow in anger as I spoke. If I were his wife, I'd have spoken up firmly. I've always thought this, but Harper, you're too lenient with him. I understand you love him, but you shouldn't let yourself be taken for granted. Her straightforward reasoning felt like a blow to my heart. In a world where everyone hesitates to speak their mind to me, Shay's the only one who treats me as an equal. This refreshing and comforting feeling is precious to me. As one's position rises, people tend to become more humble and reserved. Having someone like her who confronts me head-on is truly invaluable. You're right. What should I do? Can't you call Tyler? Maybe try talking to him after work today? There's no need to be considerate about disturbing his trip. If this continues, it could lead to a divorce crisis. Do you understand? Her sisterly advice left me with no response but to agree. Since work ended early that day, following her suggestion, I decided to call him immediately. He was in Mexico. The time difference wasn't significant, and he should be resting in his room after dinner. I had texted him earlier to let him know I needed to talk, so he should be expecting the call. Expecting no issues, I called, but he didn't answer.
Maybe he's still enjoying his time with everyone? I'll try calling again later.
I tried calling every 30 minutes, but still no answer. Worried, I contacted Samantha to inquire about Tyler's well-being.
Hello, Harper. Sorry we went on this trip just with our family. Cody and I told Tyler we'd prefer if you were with us, but he insisted.
Samantha used to be strict and education-focused, as Tyler once told me. But now, she's kind and always concerned about my busy life, offering comforting words.
No, I'm sorry I couldn't make it this year due to our company's busy schedule. Next year, I'll make time for a proper celebration.
Oh, don't worry about it. Just the fact that you're giving us such a wonderful trip is more than enough. Samantha's kind words with a smile made me feel uneasy.
A trip is a gift?
Hearing a word that was unfamiliar to me, I asked Samantha to clarify. She seemed surprised by my question and explained the situation with a tone of shock.
Oh, isn't that right? I heard from him that this trip was fully funded by you since you couldn't join the trip. Wait, what?
I screamed out loud, completely unaware of this story. Samantha must have realized from my reaction that I knew nothing about it. She hurriedly continued her explanation, seemingly puzzled.
Isn't this trip arranged by you? He paid for everything using your credit card, so I thought it was a gift from you.
The trip included Samantha and Cody, of course, as well as my sister-in-law, Luna, and her husband, Tommy. 5 people in total. Even a conservative estimate for flight costs alone would be around $300 per person. With other expenses included, the total would easily surpass $1,500. Using such a significant amount of money without consultation was completely out of line. Especially since I've been managing our living expenses. He doesn't gamble, his salary should be entirely at his disposal. He should have more than enough income to cover such costs himself. Yet here we are. With him not answering my calls, my emotions were filling with anger. Samantha, sensing my distress, spoke with concern.
Harper, are you okay? We'll repay the full amount later. Tyler wanted to cover all the travel expenses, which felt odd to us. Cody and I were planning to visit you later, since we haven't seen you in a while.
This trip might have been orchestrated under unbelievable circumstances. Samantha thought, and with a tone of concern, she spoke to me considerately.
You are not at fault. Please use that money for your enjoyment, as it's also a celebration for you. I'll make sure Tyler takes care of the bill. Could you tell me more about how this trip was planned?
I wondered what he was up to, not answering my calls. This trip must have been meticulously planned months in advance. He was using me, capitalizing on my ignorance. Such thoughts began to emerge at that moment. Then, as I heard more from Samantha, I learned a shocking truth.
The trip was initially proposed by Luna and Tommy.
Incredibly, it wasn't Tyler who suggested this, but Luna and Tommy, who always nitpicked at me. Tommy, an executive at a rival company. Tommy, looking down on me for being a female CEO and considering our companies our rivals, always seemed displeased when we met. Luna, always full of pride, had a grip on Tyler even before our marriage, and he couldn't stand up to her. It seems they didn't like him showing me any affection. It seems they disliked the affection Tyler showed towards me. Even though they conveniently used him themselves, they couldn't stand him being even slightly nice to me. Both Luna and Tommy, always competitive, disliked me, and I tried to keep my distance from them. However, they targeted me and persuaded Tyler to plan this trip. It's likely that his aggressive confrontation with me that day was instigated by Luna and Tommy. They probably wanted him to create a situation where I would be the unwanted one, as they thought they couldn't enjoy themselves with me around. They chose a day when they could make me an outcast and brought Tyler along to provide the funds.
I'm so sorry, I didn't know anything about this. Tyler told us not to contact you directly because you were busy.
Samantha apologized. If Samantha, Cody, and I, unaware of the plan, had communicated, the plan would have been exposed, potentially straining my relationship with Tyler. To prevent this, Samantha and Cody were instructed to restrict their actions. To prevent any disruption of their plan, it was necessary to impose certain restrictions on Samantha and Cody beforehand. For them, unaware of how busy my work schedule was, Tyler's advice was taken as an absolute directive. They adhered strictly to his words, deciding to thank me only after they returned from the trip.
Harper, did you give Tyler a credit card or something? He was making payments with a black card I've never seen before.
What? Samantha's frantic behavior suggested that Cody was also listening and had a question for me. The moment Cody mentioned the black card, I hastily checked the contents of my safe. The black card he referred to was the important credit card used for company expenses. Only Tyler and I, who knew the safe's password, could access it. I had trusted him enough not to suspect him of stealing, but the credit card that should have been in the safe was missing, revealing that he had been secretly embezzling company funds. As the accountant, he could freely manipulate the records. He had exploited his position, misusing company funds for personal gain. Realizing this fact, my anger reached its peak, and I shared the story with Samantha and Cody. Both of them were shocked to learn this astonishing fact. They must have been dumbfounded. Falling silent as if they had lost their words, Samantha seemed to be panicking in a flustered manner.
What should we do? Are we complicit in this embezzlement?
We'll return to the US immediately with Tyler. Even though we didn't know, we're still complicit. We'll accept our punishment when we get back. Cody's words, full of responsibility, made me deny their need for punishment. It wasn't Samantha and Cody's fault. They were completely unaware of the scheme orchestrated by Luna, Tommy, and Tyler. Punishing them was out of the question for me.
Cody, that's unnecessary. You two were deceived by Tyler and knew nothing. You're not at fault. But I can't let them get away with this. Can you help me with something I'm planning?
Sure.
I've been ignoring what Tyler has been doing all this time, and that was my mistake. He's been making a fool of me, thinking an apology would suffice if he got caught. This isn't just a marital issue, it's a company issue. I need to teach him a lesson.
All right. We'll help with anything we can. With this, I laid out a revenge plan to them. I was surprised at my own capacity for such a scheme, but my affection for Tyler had clearly ended. Filled with hatred and anger, I revealed my terrifying plan, initially bewildering Samantha and Cody. However, realizing their responsibility as parents, they made a decision. They agreed to my plan, choosing to be my allies in this matter. During this discussion, Tyler unexpectedly called me. I ended the call with Samantha and Cody to answer his call.
What's up? Having a family trip and still wanting to talk about something important?
His sarcastic words only increased my irritation.
You took your time to call. What were you doing? Just having some drinks at a bar with Mom and the others.
This confirmed his lie. I had just been on the phone with Samantha and Cody, and there was no noisy bar in the background. Moreover, there was no reason for them to lie to me. Likely, Tyler was out drinking with Luna and Tommy. His words, so dismissive of our time and relationship, confirmed my feelings had completely cooled.
Oh, is that so? By the way, Tyler, you haven't been doing anything with the company's expenses, have you?
He was clearly startled by my sudden question.
What's this all of a sudden?
His tone, usually light and cheerful, turned serious, unlike anything I had heard from him before. Was this his true nature? His change in tone, seeing me as an adversary, prompted me to respond firmly.
I was just wondering, considering an audit is coming up soon for the company. You're suspecting me?
His defensive response to a simple question indicated his guilt. His poor reply made me laugh involuntarily.
What's the matter? I was just worried and asked, and now you think I'm suspecting you. Did you do something wrong?
Nothing like that.
But hey, when I get back home, the house isn't going to be a mess, is it?
Suddenly changing his demeanor and trying to switch the topic, his actions became even more suspicious. Why couldn't he realize that such behavior only made him more suspect? I was almost impressed by his lack of intelligence.
What do you think? I'm busy with work, too.
Stop it.
I hate the idea of coming back to a dirty house with bugs and stuff, you know? A wife is her husband's housekeeper, and if you defy, I'll divorce you. Even the executive director often threatens his wife with that. I might have to do the same.
You wouldn't like that, right? So, keep the house clean. I had never seen he and the executive director being friendly. What he was saying now was probably his true feelings. But, perhaps aware of his weaker position, he used someone else as a shield, making me sigh in exasperation at his patheticness.
Sure, I'll be careful.
There was no need to continue the conversation with him. He was completely underestimating me. Using company funds and embezzling. I could have him arrested for embezzlement. I won't show mercy, even to my husband. But that alone wouldn't satisfy me. After hanging up with him, I immediately made a call to a certain place. The next day, as I was busy preparing for a fashion show, I received several calls. Of course, it was Tyler. I noticed his calls late at night, while I was out for a certain reason. Fortunately, Mia was with me, so she drove while I answered his call.
You're late. What have you been doing?
His rough tone, heard through the speakerphone, surprised both Mia and me.
Just work, what else? Harper, did you do something yesterday?
Something?
What do you mean? Don't play dumb. Tell me the truth. What did you do?
Tyler was in total panic, and in the background, I could hear several Mexican men confronting Luna, Tommy, and Tyler.
It sounds noisy. What's happening? It's nothing.
He suddenly became flustered after shouting. Realizing he'd be at a disadvantage if he spoke out, he struggled to find the right words. His behavior was so bizarre that I decided to explain the situation to him. It was time for him to taste true despair. Too bad.
You were supposed to be enjoying a lavish time in Mexico, but now you've woken up from that dream overnight, right? But it's your own fault for misusing someone else's money. Did you do something, Harper?
While he was reacting strangely, I explained what I had done the previous day. I contacted the president of the credit card company I had a contract with. Despite the late hour, the president, always grateful for my patronage, agreed to suspend the company's credit card early in the morning. If a credit card is misused, the company doesn't have to pay the shop, so the shop bears the full loss. However, this time, since the payment was supposed to be made in full at the hotel checkout, Tyler, unable to use the stopped card, was now stranded and being questioned at the hotel reception.
Tyler, Mom and Dad have already checked out. The cab they reserved took them away, so there's no one to pick you up.
Luna, cornered, desperately asked Tyler what to do. Hearing this, he became even more panicked and turned his anger towards me.
Doing such a thing, you think you can get away with it? Are you okay with us getting divorced?
Please do.
In fact, I prefer a divorce from a husband who embezzles company funds. I've already spoken to the lawyer, and will proceed with the divorce proceedings.
He, flustered by my unshaken demeanor, realized his mistake.
I've been silent about everything you have done so far. There was truth in him supporting my work, and I was grateful to him. But I've reached my limit. But,
realizing his dire situation, he pathetically acknowledged my fury. The reception, relentlessly demanding payment, showed no mercy. He, relying on an interpreter, couldn't speak Spanish at all. Listening to this, I had an idea and suggested to him to pass the phone to them.
Nobody there speaks Spanish, right? Can you let me talk to them?
I'll explain for you.
Will you help me? I'm glad to switch.
Thinking that I had changed my mind after his apparent regret, he quickly handed his mobile phone to the hotel reception. I explained the situation to the reception in Spanish, and they quickly understood. To ease any concerns, I got their contact information, which Mia noted down. They happily agreed to cooperate with my deal. After talking to me, they returned the phone to Tyler.
What happened? Did you sort it out?
Yes, I took care of it. Now it's up to you guys to manage.
Really? You're a lifesaver, Harper. I love you.
With that, he was called back to the reception. Unaware of our conversation, he ended the call and followed them. Are you okay? This might turn into a big problem.
Just perfect.
It's the right kind of hell for them. An hour later, as expected, Tyler called many times. When I answered, he was in a pathetic state.
What's going on, Harper?
What is this place? He showed me a video call of a slum street. Tyler, Luna, and Tommy had been taken to the slums and stripped of all their belongings. The fact that they ended up in one of Mexico's most dangerous slums was unexpected. The receptionist had told me, I was a fan of Harper. I'll arrange the punishment, leave it to me. But I never expected it would be this place. I laughed out loud at the location, far beyond my expectations. Lucky you. Still alive in the most dangerous place in Mexico. It's a miracle you're alive.
That's impossible. Wait, Harper. What do you mean? Explain, and come to help us right now.
From the video call, it was clear they could hear my voice. The homeless people surrounding them were causing a commotion.
You were causing trouble for Harper. It's your fault. You three should reflect.
Samantha and Cody appeared on the call, surprising Luna and the others.
Mom and Dad, what are you doing?
Harper's acquaintance flew us back on a private jet to the US, and Harper came to pick us up. We knew you were trying to trap Harper. We asked her to do whatever she wanted. At that moment, the homeless people behind them started questioning Luna, Tyler, and Tommy. The slum residents were merciless, even to women, if they seemed to have anything valuable. As they argued on the video call in the dangerous streets, it was natural they'd become prey. I spoke to the locals in the background, smiling. These men have been misusing my credit card and have been terrible to me every night. Do whatever you like with them. I want them to see hell. They agreed, saying, leave it to us. The call ended abruptly, likely because the phone was taken. Since then, they have been living in fear in the slums. Treated poorly by the locals and unable to afford a return to the US. They were effectively trapped abroad. I confirmed the events with the hotel reception afterward. Their acquaintance, apparently a boss in the slums, agreed to take care of Tyler and the others in exchange for a treat of fine liquor. The agreement was made on the condition that they'd be safe from life-threatening situations. In return, I agreed to sing at their hotel, the only song I released during my active years.
The song you released is still my treasure. Your thanks can be in the form of a song, so come stay at our hotel. I'll tell the manager to give you the best service.
With this, I successfully took my revenge on Tyler and the others. Since then, I've managed to divorce Tyler with the help of the men from the hotel. I feel relieved and am spending enjoyable times with Samantha and Cody. Luna and Tommy were fired for their unauthorized absence from work. Without their phones, they couldn't contact anyone. Samantha and Cody explained the situation well, so it didn't become a police matter, and no one else cared about them. Thus, my ties with Tyler were completely severed. Since then, I've been focusing on my work and enjoying life. Occasionally, I call the hotel reception to check on Tyler and the others, who are still living in a hellish environment. I feel no pity for them, despite the severity of their punishment. I only asked to spare their lives and now enjoy my own life to the fullest. Dropping out and living off a pension, isn't that just like a dead weight who doesn't understand the struggles of the young? Caught in a fire and still not a bit spirited. Really, society's dead weight lives the longest, huh? Tiana, my eldest son's wife, said this laughing, without a hint of malice. It was the last straw for me. Don't think getting disowned is the end of it. Divine retribution will come one day. Just you wait. My name is Violet, I'm 75. When did it start? The words I mutter when I get moving became, here we go. Ouch. Sometimes, I say them even when I'm not in pain. Back when my body issues were fewer than now, and I had just turned 60. A shocking piece of news landed between my recently retired husband, Cody, and me. Our eldest son, Ethan, not particularly bright and with kindness as his only trait, was getting married. Ethan wanted a family meeting, and Cody and I joyfully agreed. Who could have chosen our unremarkable Ethan? On the day of the meeting, Tiana, a well-dressed woman, appeared at our house. Not especially beautiful or flashy. But her behavior was elegant and refined, perhaps due to good upbringing, leaving Cody and me speechless. You didn't just bring some secretary pretending to be your girlfriend, did you? I couldn't help but ask Ethan. But as we listened to them, her background became clear. She was the daughter of a chain of Italian restaurants. With 2 older brothers, she wasn't expected to take over the family business. But if something happened to her brothers, Ethan might have to step in. I wondered if Ethan could handle such a responsibility, but the warm atmosphere between him and Tiana made it seem possible. They were more in love than I imagined. We approved their marriage, and they wed. Everything seemed perfect. Then one day, Tiana called. "Oh, Tiana, what's up? Calling so suddenly?" Violet. I heard from Ethan yesterday. Is it true that Cody dropped out?" "Yes, that's right. He was the youngest, and our parents couldn't afford to send him to school." "Why do you ask?" Dropping out was common and not unusual. And Ethan's parents' education had nothing to do with his marriage. I optimistically failed to understand the intention behind her question. "And you're not working now, right?" "Just retired. Enjoying a leisurely pension life." I replied with a laugh, but the air over the phone turned heavy. "Tiana, something wrong?" I'm a bit confused. "So, you're saying he never really accomplished anything in society and now just lives off a pension?" "What?" Both Cody and I had worked and paid taxes. I didn't know if we contributed to society, but we hadn't been a burden. I didn't understand her point, but I felt looked down upon. Finally, that day, she said, "Let me think about this," and hung up. Wondering if I should tell Ethan about this, I consulted with Cody. Tiana's intentions aren't clear, and it might be a misunderstanding. Let's wait and see. That's what happened. 2 months later, Ethan and Tiana visited us during a long vacation. I hoped that Tiana had misunderstood something about the dropout issue. For their visit, I prepared seasonal ingredients and fancy seafood. But, what's this? Tiana, who came to help in the kitchen, looked at the ingredients and got furious. There were no known allergies, and serving shrimp and crab wasn't unusual. I had no idea why she was so angry. "Who decided to have a meal like this?" "Well, it was Cody. He did it because you guys were coming over." "He is on a pension, right? Living comfortably off the big taxes we worked hard to pay. Please don't indulge in luxuries like everyone else." "Hey! That's no way to talk. We don't even indulge in luxuries normally, and we've been paying into our pension all this time." "That's the problem with you people. You benefit from everything, from healthcare to pensions, while young people like us work hard, knowing our future pensions will be almost non-existent. If you have money for luxuries, donate it to the younger generation." While I stood there dumbfounded, she sighed again. "In my family, my parents and brothers all went to college, studied hard, and provide dedicated service to society and our customers every day. And they earn well, of course. Cody, he worked in a factory, right? Didn't study much and settled for low wages, just moving his body around, and his future was secured. How nice. We work hard but never feel it's enough for our efforts." I couldn't tell if we were indeed better off than Tiana's family unless I compared our incomes. But, regardless, it wasn't fair for her to say all this. Does she even understand how the pension system works? I wondered. If you have so many complaints, then leave. I was about to say that when What's all this noise about? Cody, who should have been at the grocery store with Ethan, appeared from behind. Cody. Tears welled up in my eyes, maybe because of the harsh words thrown at him. He had always worked hard for our family. He even gave up school for us. He's a respectable man who's been working tirelessly for us. He doesn't deserve to be looked down on like this.
Cody, can you please stop living so luxuriously? Huh?
With a haughty attitude and arms crossed, Tiana glared at him. This woman, she's still mocking Cody.
If you're living off a pension, please lead a modest life or save for your demise. We don't want our hard-earned money going to people like you.
Tiana, what's wrong?
I'm not living luxuriously or anything. No. Just preparing all these fine ingredients is a nuisance. We can afford this with our own money.
It's not like they're high-end ingredients. I just thought it'd be nice for today. If you're feeling uncomfortable.
That's not it. It makes me sick that people like you, who never studied properly and just continued a fool's job, live off pensions and eat like this.
I thought to myself, factory work varies, and without people manufacturing, you wouldn't have the car you came in. But I stayed silent. Nothing I said would get through to her. But Cody reacted differently.
I tried to be understanding because you're Ethan's wife, but this is too much.
I paled, realizing he was angry. He rarely gets angry, maybe once in every 8 years, more rarely than the Olympics. If he exploded now, Tiana would be in trouble. That's when it happened. From the back room, I heard an explosion and the sound of something collapsing.
Dad, Mom, Tiana. There's a fire in the back. Get out quick.
Guided by Ethan, who rushed and drenched with water, we managed to escape the house without harm. Exhausted, we all watched our home engulfed in flames.
It's good that everyone's safe,
Ethan muttered. Yes, I replied. It seemed like an electrical fault in the neighbor's house had caused the fire, which spread to ours. Almost everything except the second floor was burned, and the house was unlivable.
What a long vacation this turned out to be. What do we do now?
Cody mused. Yes. Watching us, Tiana said.
We're not going to take care of you.
We, who had not even thought of asking for such a thing, exchanged glances in surprise. What is this kid talking about?
When times like this come, isn't it like this? You old folks living on pensions don't have money, so you say, you're the eldest son, so you should take us in, right? I read it on the internet.
You wouldn't say something like that, would you, Cody?
Of course not. I wouldn't bother Tiana or Ethan with such things.
Cody, calmed by the fire and now exhausted, nodded. Ethan watched our exchange with a solemn expression. I was afraid to ask what he thought.
Just so you know, don't try to get closer to us just because our house burned down. Tiana, what's gotten into you? We never said we'd do anything like that.
Cody continued.
That's right.
He agreed with my words. It seemed like the anger was flaring up again.
People with no brains can't imagine what others might think. After all, how can you, living on pensions, rebuild your lives with no education?
Tiana laughed mockingly. I couldn't deny it. I wasn't sure about the cost of house repairs, and how much would the fire insurance cover. I had just heard that if it's a fire spread from somewhere else, suing the responsible party isn't an option. Beyond education, there aren't many places a 60-year-old can work.
Violet, you're just a high school graduate, but dropout Cody will just be a burden to you.
Tiana said this with a smile, seemingly without any malice. Anger welled up inside me.
You're still lively despite being caught in a fire. Society's burdens live the longest.
Before Cody could grab Tiana by the collar in response to her words, my slap should have exploded. But my slap didn't hit Tiana, it struck Ethan's left cheek.
Ethan! Why are you defending her? You're making a mockery of Dad.
Cody restrained me as I cried out, and Ethan stepped forward as if to shield Tiana.
I'm sorry,
Ethan muttered, looking down.
Does marrying mean your wife is more important? Are we, your family, nothing to you?
It's not like that. But I love her too, so whether she's wrong or right, I can't choose. My dear Ethan, whose only good trait was his kindness, had become merely indecisive. I had carried and raised Ethan with care. I understood his feelings. I would have liked to support his kind heart if possible. But I just couldn't get along with Tiana anymore.
That's enough. Dad and I will cut ties with her. We won't see you either.
I couldn't bring myself to say cut ties with Ethan too. My weakness was apparent. I might be called pathetic, but I just couldn't bear to easily sever ties with Ethan. I never imagined spending the last years of my life like this. My body trembled, whether from fear, anxiety, or the excitement of my outburst. And so, my husband and I, and Ethan and his wife, started walking separate paths. 10 years later, after various circumstances, we were living with Cedric, our second son, and his wife. 2 days after the fire, when Cedric was supposed to visit, I contacted him. "Why don't you live with us?" He said it so casually, and we've been living together ever since. Cedric's wife, Caddy, had been unwell since giving birth and struggled with household chores. Then came our house fire. It goes without saying that Cedric's suggestion to live with us had an ulterior motive. But in exchange for doing household chores, living rent-free was a good deal for us. Even if the household chores meant playing with the grandchildren or cooking, being able to see them grow up every day was a reward for us. We shared household duties with Caddy, and we took over entirely when she felt unwell, so there was no inconvenience at all. Living with us might actually be easier for them than when it was just the two of us. I never really minded or felt dissatisfied, but Cody isn't much of a housekeeper. After cutting ties with Tiana and leaving our burnt house, I felt a daily happiness, as if the words disposal of unnecessary items, huge success, were floating in my head. Then, one day, after finishing dinner and about to serve cookies I made with my grandchildren, the doorbell rang. "Hello?" Caddy answered in her usual manner.
"Help!"
And from the monitor came a voice. Those grave words made us brace for some emergency. "Tiana?" Caddy looked bewildered, alternating glances between the monitor and us. "Eh? Tiana?" I couldn't believe it and looked at the monitor, where Ethan and his wife stood. "What are you doing here?" I couldn't help but ask. "Please, we apologize for everything in the past, just help our company." The sight of Ethan and his wife asking for help through the monitor caught even me off guard. Worried the neighbors might think oddly of Cedric's family, I hurriedly opened the door. "What's this all about? Why so sudden?" I asked. Behind me stood Cody, and a little further back, Cedric watched us with concern, protecting his children and Caddy. "Our family business is about to go bankrupt." "The family business, United Capital Holdings? You've expanded since your marriage, it should be fine, right?" Indeed, her family business had grown rapidly since their marriage, now a respectable corporation. I knew from the newspapers a few years back that Ethan had joined the management, following her grandfather's wish to keep it family-operated. But at this moment, I pretended not to know. Although I was fully aware of their imminent bankruptcy and its reasons. Of course. They had to come to our house, and I could barely suppress a laugh. No. I mustn't laugh. I can't divulge details, but expanding so much has backfired. Can you help us without asking anything?
Let me guess, you hired manager candidates thinking anyone would be fine as long as they were college graduates, and they did whatever they wanted? I know all about it.
Cody was the one who reacted to her words. Like me, he, who knew everything, couldn't completely hide his amusement. "So you knew, Mr. Gourmet Iron Man," Tiana said, looking dejected.
"Since living here, Cedric often takes me out to eat. Starting a blog turned out to be popular, what a hassle."
Cody laughed. Since moving in with Cedric and his family, Cody, who loved food, was frequently taken out to various restaurants by Cedric. He started reviewing the flavors on a blog, which became popular for its honest depiction of minor local eateries. Now, he even writes articles for magazines, introducing recommended gourmet maps. Gourmet Ironman was his pen name. His articles were so influential that celebrities often visited the restaurants he reviewed. Cody, once mocked as a dropout living on a pension, now earned his income solely through his talent for writing and popularity, regardless of his educational background. I saw you entering a restaurant I know and realized you are the Gourmet Ironman. Please, Cody, I apologize for the past, but can you feature our restaurant on your blog or in the media? Ethan added, I know it's too convenient, but I'm asking too. I had once cared deeply for Ethan, no doubt about it. But after 10 years without contact, their return now, trying to salvage only the good parts, made me feel nauseous beyond disgust. It's way too convenient. Even if you apologize, your mindset hasn't changed, has it? We're still living on pensions, you know? Can you still apologize despite that? Tiana responded to my words. I can apologize. She responded immediately. Your pride and beliefs are so flimsy. You insulted us over something so trivial that you can apologize so easily? That is. Isn't it because people like that are in management that the store's business is getting worse? Always about money, no passion in what they do. Say whatever you want to me. I'll take it as my punishment. But please, the article about our store. At that moment, well, that's a bit of a problem. Cody said. What? Exclaimed Tiana. Didn't your family also runs a Japanese restaurant called Sakura besides Italian place, Ruble D? Yes. And the ramen place, Ramen Master, right? Yes, but what does that have to do with anything? I knew about Ruble D since you got married, but I didn't know much about the managing company, so I ended up writing bad reviews for the other places too. Just the day before yesterday. What? She was frozen by Cody's revelation. The magazine asked me to write a critical piece on these places. They said they'd been getting bad reviews lately and wanted to feature them. So I wrote exactly what I saw. I even spread rumors about the poor attitude of the managers, which I heard from another writer during my visit. The ramen place served bowls with fingers in them, and the Japanese place lacked cleanliness. Some dishes were served cold, as if they were frozen. Isn't that a bit much? I also heard about this from Cody, saying, I might have written something bad about Tiana's family. That's how I learned about her family situation. It was more of a disclosure of facts than bad-mouthing. What else was there? Cody muttered as Tiana started to tremble. Did you write about everything? It was my way of showing care. I thought it was unfair for customers to suffer losses. I've submitted the article today. Hearing about the submission, Tiana, who was clinging to Cody, and Ethan both collapsed weakly on the spot. You're kidding, right? She murmured. Education doesn't really matter in the end. If we take care of things one at a time, everyone gets equal results, and even small talents can grow with effort. Like Cody. Your family only hires college grads, which isn't bad, but you can't judge someone's character by a resume. You look down on people too much. Did you learn something? At my words, Tiana contorted her face and apologized. I'm sorry. She must have realized how shameful her behavior had been towards someone she had once cut ties with. She apologized and left. Ethan also said, I'm truly sorry for forgetting the kindness of those who raised me and for constantly choosing the wrong path. And with tears, he followed Tiana. I wish they had realized this sooner but didn't say it aloud. That's your path. Keep going. Even though we cut ties, a parent's heart remains. After Cody's article was published, it became a hot topic, and Tiana's family's store lost customers. Reports said they were using expired meat and mislabeling products. It became apparent they were a conglomerate of scandals and closed all stores within a year. Bankruptcy. From what I hear on internet forums, Ethan and Tiana divorced after that incident. Tiana struggles to find work outside the food industry and lives alone in a cheap apartment. Ethan was seen working part-time at a discount store near their old home. There were arguments heard from their home before the bankruptcy, and their marriage deteriorated as the business did. Both cut off ties, and though I can't confirm the truth, I hope Ethan learns what's truly right for him through these hardships. If we ever meet again, no, I'm still too angry. They should suffer and learn from society. As for me, I've recovered from an illness a few years ago and am now living happier and healthier, all thanks to the dedicated support of Cedric and his wife, and the joy of my grandchildren. And most of all, it's thanks to my precious husband who heals me. Caddy has grown much stronger and is now a powerful mom. Caddy says, "It's starting to look like you." That said, I was supposed to be ladylike. It's strange. I do see similarities in the way we scold our grandchildren or when I'm admonishing Cedric. It's strange how non-blood-related family members can resemble each other. I want to continue watching over Cedric and his family. Since recovering, I've started going on walking dates 3 times a week to a nearby park with Cody. It's a small joy, but it feels like returning to my youth, and I'm happy. I'll keep taking care of my health and enjoy this once-in-a-lifetime life.